Chapter 74. When Tiange washed her face in the evening, she suddenly understood why she felt that woman's face was familiar. After removing her disguise, her face in the mirror was clearly somewhat similar to that woman's. The similarities were in their eyebrows and facial contours. The facial contours were fine, but their eyebrows and eyes were too similar. If she hadn't disguised herself, she might have been discovered on the spot. It was strange. She didn't have any sisters, and the closest relatives were all in the secular world. It was impossible for Yi clan's people to still stay in Kunwu, right? Second uncle said that when he moved Yi clan to the secular world, he especially left a message that unless they had spiritual roots, they would never set foot in Kunwu again. This woman was immortal, so she obviously didn't have spiritual roots. She stood in front of the mirror for a while, but she couldn't figure out why, so she returned to the bed and meditated. If she wanted to figure it out, she would go and ask her tomorrow. After reaching the peak stage of the aura refining realm, she discovered that the spiritual aura in her body had changed. She practiced two cultivation techniques. One was the art of Sunu, and the other was the greenwood art. Because the art of Sunu was faster, it was her main cultivation technique, while the greenwood art was her secondary cultivation technique. However, the spiritual aura absorbed by these two cultivation techniques was about the same. Although the greenwood art absorbed with spiritual aura, it also absorbed a small amount of other spiritual aura. The art of Sunu, on the other hand, could absorb any kind of spiritual aura. The spiritual aura absorbed by the two cultivation techniques was mixed together, so there was no difference. However, after reaching the peak stage of the aura refining realm, a wisp of Yin spiritual aura gradually appeared in her body. It was very small, but it was very different from other spiritual auras. The two wisps of spiritual aura circulated in her meridians, neither interacting nor repelling each other. She didn't have time to tell second uncle about this, but it didn't seem harmful at the moment, so she just let it be. Now that she had reached the peak stage of the aura refining realm, cultivating couldn't increase her spiritual aura, it could only make her spiritual aura purer. Tiange was just used to cultivating, so she would meditate when she had nothing to do. However, something surprising happened during her habitual cultivation this time. The two unrelated wisps of spiritual aura in her dantian and meridians were still circulating separately, but the wisp of Yin spiritual aura gradually became more abundant. After discovering this phenomenon, she did an experiment. In her dantian, she separated the two types of spiritual aura into two strands and let them slowly come into contact with each other. As a result, not long after, the mixed spiritual aura of each attribute decreased a little, and the cool spiritual aura increased a little. Once she verified that this cool spiritual aura could nibble away at her original spiritual aura, she immediately stopped cultivating. Although she could control the two spiritual auras at the moment and there was no difference, she still hadn't figured out what was going on with this cold spiritual aura. It was best not to act rashly. After pondering for a while, she felt that this Yin spiritual aura might be Yin aura produced by cultivating the art of Sunu. However, the cultivation technique didn't mention this change, so she didn't dare to confirm it. Generally speaking, the sky was Yang, the earth was Yin, men were Yang, and women were Yin. Actually, both men and women had Yin and Yang in their bodies. It was just that men had more Yang and less Yin, while women had more Yin and less Yang. As a result, the cultivation techniques of the cultivation world were created specifically for female cultivators, and all of them leaned towards the Yin attribute. Since the art of Sunu could only be practiced by female cultivators with pure Yin constitution, it must be even more so. However, she had never heard that the spiritual aura produced by female cultivators was different from that of male cultivators, so she couldn't be sure whether this was Yin aura or not. The night passed very quickly. Tiange packed her things and went out. Today was the opening day of the Tao conference jointly organized by the market square. On this day every month, the surrounding cultivators would flock to this place. Most of them were aura refining cultivators who yearned to enter Tiandao sect. Occasionally, there were also foundation building cultivators who wanted to discuss Dao with Tiandao sect's cultivators. Mo Tiange had already inquired about the location of the Daoist sanctum. After taking several detours, she directly walked towards an ordinary small courtyard. The gate of the small courtyard was open, and there were 2 low-level cultivators guarding the gate. Occasionally, people would come and hand over spirit stones in exchange for an identity tablet. Mo Tiange followed behind them, handed over 2 spirit stones, received a wooden identity tablet with a number engraved on it, and entered the small courtyard. Soon after, she passed through a central room and was led into another room. She then walked up a staircase leading to the underground. After making many turns and walking for a while, she finally entered a hall. This hall was enormous, not much smaller than Yunwu sect's preaching palace. It could accommodate at least 1,000 people. The innermost part of the hall was a high platform with several praying mats on it. Below the platform, tables, chairs, and praying mats were all available. After listening to the receptionist's introduction, Mo Tiange finally learned that if one paid an extra spirit stone, they could sit on a chair. At that time, she simply didn't ask and only paid the admission fee, so she could only sit on a praying mat. In any case, she didn't care, so she found a corner that was neither too far nor too close to sit down and closed her eyes to rest. In fact, most people still sat on praying mats. 2 spirit stones per month was already quite a lot for individual cultivators. Ordinary aura refining disciples of Yunwu sect only received 5 spirit stones per month. People entered the Daoist sanctum one after another. After a long time, the number of people gradually increased. When the hall was gradually full, Mo Tiange opened her eyes and observed her surroundings. There were quite a lot of people who came, but only 20% of the seats were empty. Among these people, some were loose cultivators dressed casually, some were disciples of small sects dressed in sect uniforms, and some were disciples of big clans with attendants. It seemed this Dao conference was very successful. Not only individual cultivators came, but even people from cultivation groups and clans were willing to come. This made her look forward to this Dao conference a bit more. There were still people coming in from the outside. It wasn't until the people who came occupied the 9th floor that the people gradually stopped coming. A quarter of an hour later, the hall's door was closed. At the same time, the small door at the innermost part of the hall opened, and several aura refining cultivators led a foundation building cultivator to the high platform. At the same time, all the aura refining cultivators in the hall stood up and saluted. Seeing this, Mo Tiange also followed the crowd. This foundation building cultivator was a man in his early 30s. He wore a light purple Daoist robe with white edges. His expression was calm and he looked a bit like an immortal. Mo Tiange couldn't sense which stage of the foundation building cultivator he was in, unless low-level cultivators practiced some kind of secret technique. They wouldn't be able to sense the specific cultivation level of high-level cultivators. However, the lifespan of foundation building cultivators was between 300 to 400 years. This cultivator looked like he was only in his 30s, so his real age was probably less than 100 years old. Based on the average age of foundation building cultivators, he could be considered young. The foundation building cultivator sat down on a praying mat in the middle of the high platform. He glanced at the audience and said, "Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Wen Xiangdao from Tiandao sect. Today, I'll give a sermon to everyone. If any fellow Taoists want to come, you're also welcome." The man paused for a moment, then continued, "I think everyone has probably heard a lot about cultivation experiences. Why don't I tell everyone about my foundation building experience today?" Hearing this, Mo Tiange immediately became spirited. Originally, she was only interested in this kind of Dao conference organized by market squares. She didn't expect they'd talk about foundation building experiences. This was exactly what she wanted to hear the most right now. As for foundation building experiences, the martial uncles in Yunwi's sect who gave sermons also talked about them to aura refining disciples who were about to build their foundation. However, she didn't know how they compared to the foundation building cultivators in Tiandao's sect. She wasn't the only one who was excited, the others were even more excited. It must be known that individual cultivators rarely had the opportunity to hear about this kind of content. Although clans' descendants and disciples from small cultivation groups had the opportunity, this was a cultivator from Tiandao's sect, the #1 cultivation group in the celestial pole. It was definitely different from what their seniors said. When Xiangdao paused for a moment as if he was thinking about how to start. After a while, he slowly said, I think everyone knows how aura refining cultivators build their foundation. First, they have to cultivate until they reach the peak of the 10th layer of the aura refining realm. Second, they have to take a foundation building pill. Then, they have to enter closed-door meditation for 1.5 years. If they succeed, they'll advance to the foundation building realm. If they fail, they'll remain in the aura refining realm. If they're relatively lucky, they'll enter the 11th layer of the aura refining realm. Now, I'll talk about my process and experiences in building my foundation. I have 3 spiritual roots and am very ordinary in Tiandao's sect. The cultivation technique I practice is also a very ordinary 5 elements cultivation technique. I was lucky enough to obtain a foundation building pill, and as a result, I succeeded in building my foundation on my first try. I think many of you are as ordinary as I am. Ordinary people like me have very little hope of building their foundation, but you're also hoping that your ancestors will be blessed with luck and you'll be able to enter the foundation building realm in one go. But what I want to tell you today is that building your foundation isn't just about luck. As we all know, spiritual roots affect the speed at which one absorbs spiritual aura, affects the effect of cultivation, and also affects the probability of advancing to the next realm. It can be said that people with few spiritual roots are more suitable for cultivation than those with mixed spiritual roots. Some people can advance to the next realm easily, while others have to struggle bitterly. Of course, you shouldn't be delusional enough to think that building your foundation has nothing to do with spiritual roots. That's impossible. However, as long as you have enough patience, you can still slightly shorten the distance between you and people with natural spiritual roots. Many cultivators, after cultivating until the peak of the 10th layer of the aura refining realm, are anxious to immediately advance to the next realm. In fact, there are still several factors that affect the success rate of building your foundation. One of them is the density of your spiritual aura. His last sentence surprised Mo Tiange. Density of spiritual aura. What does that mean? When Xiangdao went on to say, do you know what kind of changes will happen to your body after you build your foundation? He swept his gaze over everyone. As he expected, everyone was silent, so he continued, let me tell you something. If you build your foundation, your meridians will become wider, your dantian will become bigger, and the spiritual aura that originally flowed between your dantian and meridians will become liquid. This way, your body will have extra space to continue absorbing spiritual aura. By now, you should have already guessed what I'm going to say. Yes, if you stay in the 10th layer of the aura refining realm for a long time, your spiritual aura will become a bit purer, and it'll be very easy for you to achieve the condition of turning your spiritual aura into liquid. Mo Tiange had never heard of this theory before. Second uncle only told her that it would be difficult to build his foundation if time was too tight, but he never mentioned these reasons. Mo Tiange didn't know whether this theory was concluded by Tiandao's sect or not, but she immediately concentrated on recording everything in a jade slip. She planned to tell second uncle when she went back and let him judge whether it was the correct explanation. When Xiangdao talked non-stop for an hour before he finally finished explaining this part. He paused for a moment then started the next part. In addition, I also want to tell everyone that just because inner demons appear only in the core formation realm, you shouldn't ignore your mentality. You're right, inner demons indeed won't appear in the foundation building realm, but your mentality will affect your behavior and also affect your confidence. Don't ignore your mentality. A person with a stable mentality will start building his foundation in an orderly manner and will be able to calmly solve problems he encounters. This way, from another perspective, will also increase his chances of building his foundation. Chapter 75. Since no foundation building cultivators came to discuss Dao, the Dao meeting ended. Nevertheless, everyone was satisfied. On her way back, Mo Tiange was still thinking about what the Tian Dao sect cultivators said. In fact, there were only 2 points. One was to purify her spiritual aura as much as possible, and the second was to calm her mind so that she could easily meditate before building her foundation. Although Tian Dao sect's summary of foundation building experience wasn't limited to these 2 points, it was better than nothing. If she could gather more information about foundation building, she'd have more confidence in building her foundation. A calm mind was easy to handle. Mo Tiange originally came out to travel because she was pressed for time, so she was flustered. Presumably, she'd be fine after a while. The first question made her a bit embarrassed. Because the spiritual aura in her body had undergone a special change, she didn't dare to cultivate. She could only wait until she went back and asked second uncle. After returning to the inn full of worries, she suddenly remembered she hadn't asked about yesterday's matter. Just as she was about to go out, she suddenly saw a figure going upstairs, so she hurriedly went back to her room. It was a somewhat ear-piercing male voice with an oily tone that made people feel uncomfortable. Today, we finally have a place to stay. We don't have to sleep in the open. Someone immediately said, Senior Marshal Brother Jiang, you can stay in this room. It's comfortable. The oily male voice seemed to size up the room and said with satisfaction, the inn in this small place isn't bad. All right, quickly choose and serve some good wine and dishes. Soon after, the waiter said, yes, yes. Master Immortals, please choose as you please. After that, she heard the sound of the door closing. They must have entered the room. Mo Tiange thought for a moment but didn't release her divine sense. The person she saw was the one called Senior Marshal Brother Jiang. He seemed to be Jiang Shanghang's cousin, Jiang Qingxian. Jiang Qingxian was really lucky. During the last foundation building pill test, people from Zixia sect and fellow disciples from Yunhui sect wanted to kill him, but he still managed to escape alive. Moreover, it was said that the current master of Mount Yunhui had already prepared everything for him to build his foundation. However, it was really strange. Why did Jiang Qingxian come out when he was about to build his foundation? She quietly opened the door. Seeing that there was no one in the corridor outside, she cast an illusory transformation technique and left the inn. She walked into the same shop as last time. The shopkeeper was still that beautiful mortal woman. Upon seeing her, she greeted her enthusiastically, Immortal Master, what would you like to buy? Mo Tiange took the form of an ordinary-looking youth. She lowered her voice and asked, what do you have here? His tone was quite unkind, but the woman didn't say anything. She continued to introduce enthusiastically, our shop has all kinds of ordinary things. The best are talisman paper and talisman brushes. Oh. Let me have a look. The woman took out a pile of talisman papers and various colored talisman brushes and placed them on the counter. Please feel free to take a look. Mo Tiange glanced at her then said calmly, you don't seem to be that great. The woman still smiled and said, of course, it's nothing special. However, the craftsmanship of making talisman paper and talisman brush is passed down in my husband's family. I don't see such good quality and cheap goods in other shops. So, the things in your shop are very cheap. The woman said, Immortal Master is not from here, right? A small shop like ours indeed can't compare to a big shop. We rely on low prices to keep a foothold. Otherwise, if everyone went to a big shop with a full range of goods and top-quality goods, our shop wouldn't be able to continue operating. Mo Tiange naturally understood this. Back then, she also opened a shop with her uncle. Their small shop couldn't compete with the big shops, but many small cultivators still came because they didn't have much money and couldn't afford to buy things from the big shops. The big shops also didn't bother to compete with the small shop for this small amount of money, so the small shop could survive. Later, they were bullied because second uncle was, after all, a foundation-building cultivator. He also had some wealth, so his collection was very complete. He also had some top-quality aura refining goods, so he began to compete with the big shops for customers. Mo Tiange pretended to be skeptical. Is that so? The woman said, Immortal Master, take a look. These talisman papers are made from a mixture of Wenqing bamboo and demonic beast blood. Wenqing bamboo is hard, so the paper it makes is airtight. It's not inferior to top-quality talisman papers. As for this talisman brush, it's made from the fur of a bloodfrost wolf. Each strand is carefully selected. All of these were hunted by my husband, so I guarantee they're genuine. Mo Tiange took a look, but for a moment, she didn't say whether she wanted it or not. Instead, she started to size up the other things in the shop. She pretended to be careless and asked, You said this is a craftsmanship passed down in your husband's family, so you're also from a cultivation clan. Why does your shop look so shabby? The woman's smile froze for a moment, but she immediately smiled and said, A small clan naturally can't open a big shop. Immortal Master, please take a look. If you need anything, just call me directly. As she spoke, Mo Tiange secretly sized her up many times. The more she looked, the more she felt they resembled each other. From her probing, she could tell that this husband and wife didn't have any backing. That being the case, she didn't care about a fifth-layer aura refining cultivator. I have something to ask, madam. The woman was still smiling, so Mo Tiange asked, May I know madam's name? Once she said that, the woman suddenly looked nervous. She took a step back, and her face turned green and white. Mo Tiange smiled and said, Madam, don't be afraid. I don't have any ulterior motives. Although she explained it this way, she was now dressed like a man and was also a cultivator. It would be strange if the woman wasn't afraid if she suddenly asked for her name. Seeing that the woman was still hesitating, Mo Tiange released her spiritual aura pressure. The woman was only a mortal, so how could she withstand it? She retreated several steps and leaned against the wall. In the end, she gave in and said, My surname is Mo. Mo Tiange was dumbfounded. After a long time, she thought of another possibility and anxiously asked, Mo as in stranger. The woman nodded. Yes. Mo Tiange stared fixedly at her. Finally, she found some traces of the past on the woman's face. As it turned out, this woman wasn't a member of Yi clan, but rather the Mo clan where she lived for 10 years. Mo Tiange's expression was uncertain. In the end, she said tentatively, Tianqiao. The woman was shocked. She stared at Mo Tiange with great astonishment, both because of her name and because of the sudden change in her voice. Upon seeing her reaction, Mo Tiange knew she guessed correctly. After a long time, she finally calmed down. With a wave of her hand, she withdrew the shape-shifting technique and wiped off the disguise on her face. From the woman's shocked expression, Mo Tiange could tell that the two of them had similar appearances. The woman's face turned pale and then red. She was extremely excited. You're Tiange. Mo Tiange nodded and sighed. Tianxiao, I didn't expect we'd meet again. Mo Tianxiao covered her mouth. Tears streamed down her cheeks. After a long time, she suddenly threw herself at Mo Tiange. Tiange, is it really you? Mo Tiange supported her and said warmly, it's really me. Don't cry. It's not easy for us to meet again. You should be happy. Yes, yes. Mo Tianxiao hastily wiped the tears off her face and went to close the door. Wait a moment. I'll close the shop first. Let's talk in the back. Mo Tiange nodded, then closed her eyes to calm herself down. Although she wasn't as excited as Tianxiao, she was still very happy when she got the answer. Not long after she arrived in Kunwu, she followed second uncle to wander around. Gradually, she realized she couldn't go back and had to give up everything in the secular world. If there was anything she was reluctant to leave in that family, it would be Tianxiao. She also felt sad in silence, thinking she would never see Tianxiao again. But she never expected the two of them would meet again, and it would be like this. Mo Tiange followed Tianxiao back to the inner room and looked around. There was a small courtyard behind the house. It was very neat and tidy, but it could also be seen that they didn't have a good life. Mo Tianxiao, who had already wiped her tears, looked at Mo Tiange's appearance and said in amazement, Tiange, why are you dressed like this? Mo Tiange smiled bitterly. It can't be helped. The cultivation world is the same as the secular world. It's more convenient to be a man. First, tell me, how did you come to Kunwu? And, you even married a cultivator. She still remembered that eldest aunt raised Tianxiao like a daughter from a noble family and wanted her to marry into a wealthy family. She also always thought Tianxiao would be like that. Mo Tianxiao smiled, then sighed softly. As it turned out, when Mo Tiange was taken away by an immortal, Tianxiao learned about this world and was full of curiosity about it. When she was 16 years old, her family arranged a marriage for her to the young master of a rich family in Feiyin town. Tianxiao was originally very dissatisfied with this marriage because the young master she was going to marry was simply a hedonistic son of a rich family. He didn't like to study, didn't know how to do business, and liked to have illicit affairs. Her resistance was futile, so she secretly ran out of the Mo family's village. She unexpectedly ran into a passing cultivator. Because of their reverence for immortals and because Tianxiao vowed to never agree to the marriage, after the cultivator resolved the conflict, her family finally agreed to let them be. Soon after, the cultivator was about to leave the Mo family's village. Tianxiao, who originally yearned for the cultivation world very much, left with him. After listening to this, Mo Tiange was silent. Tianxiao wasn't a woman who meekly accepted adversity, so it wasn't strange for her to resist the marriage. What was strange was, how did Tianxiao become like this? She couldn't help but ask, was he good to you? Tianxiao was lost in thought for a while before she said, in the beginning, he treated me really well. We wandered in the secular world for several years before we arrived in Kunwu. His father was also a cultivator, but he died in an accident during a fight of magical powers. When we arrived in Kunwu, we relied on the craftsmanship passed down in his family to open a small shop here. Maybe it was because life was too dull, or maybe it was because cultivation was too difficult, but it gradually faded away. Although this was the case, Mo Tiange still didn't understand. Could a dull life turn Tianxiao into what she was today? She never thought this gentlewoman would be the Tianxiao who loved to play and laugh in the past. Mo Tianxiao forced a smile and said, don't just talk about me. What about you? Your cultivation level is very high now, right? When you came yesterday, my husband said your cultivation level was much higher than his. Mo Tiange said, I'm already in the peak stage of the aura refining realm, but I don't have a chance to build my foundation. This time, I came out to travel and see if there are any fated chances. She didn't tell the truth, not because she wanted to hide it from Tianqiao, but because she wanted to hide it from her husband. Right now, she still couldn't figure out that person, so it was better to be a bit more careful. Mo Tianqiao didn't really understand these things, so she asked, then how have you been all these years? When I left the Mo family's village, that person took me to find my second uncle. Later, I followed my second uncle and wandered everywhere. A few years ago, we finally settled down in a place and I also entered a cultivation group. Because my father left some things for me, I was lucky enough to cultivate to the peak stage of the aura refining realm. Mo Tiange roughly recounted her experiences in the past few years, skipping over some things that were hard to explain. To be honest, she didn't have a good impression of Tianqiao's husband, so there were a lot of things she didn't tell him. Tianqiao originally had a lively and jumpy personality, but now, she was so gentle and obedient, working hard to guard the small shop and humbling herself to entertain customers. If she hadn't confirmed that this was really Tianqiao, she wouldn't have believed it. However, Tianqiao's expression was so calm. Even though she felt wronged in her heart, she did it willingly. Mo Tiange didn't understand. Could love really change a person? Chapter 76. A voice came from outside. Soon after, the door leading to the shop was opened, and someone said tiredly, "Wife, why did you close the door?" Tianqiao hastily stood up. "Husband, Before she could say anything, the cultivator had already stepped into the main house. When he saw Mo Tiange, his expression changed. His gaze moved back and forth between the two of them, and anger appeared on his face. However, he was afraid of Mo Tiange's cultivation level, so he endured it. Mo Tiange knew he was thinking the wrong way, but Tianqiao already said, "Husband, do you remember I told you I have a younger sister who's also a cultivator?" The cultivator was stunned and looked puzzled. Tianqiao then said, "What a coincidence. Kunwu is so big, but we actually met." The meaning of her words was very clear. The cultivator's puzzled gaze fell on Mo Tiange. "You mean?" Mo Tianqiao pulled Mo Tiange's hand and said with a smile, "This is my younger sister." Younger sister. He stared at the 10th layer aura refining cultivator in front of him. She really didn't look like a woman. Upon seeing this, Mo Tiange took the initiative to salute him. "I'm Mo Tiange." The cultivator hastily returned the salute, but his gaze was still puzzled. Tianqiao explained, "Husband, Tiange only disguised herself as a man for convenience." "Oh, I see." When he regained his composure and looked at Mo Tiange again, a smile appeared on his face. "Please don't take offense at my rudeness just now. I'm Tianqiao's husband, Meng Sigue." Meng Sigue, this name was indeed elegant. Mo Tiange showed a faint smile. "I came too suddenly." Seeing that they were friendly, Mo Tianqiao felt relieved and said, "Husband, you can chat with Tiange for a while. I'm going to make 2 dishes." Meng Sigue nodded. "And, rest assured." Tianqiao then said to Mo Tiange, "I know you cultivators don't like to be involved in worldly affairs, but you probably haven't eaten your hometown's dishes for a long time. Why don't you eat with me today?" Mo Tiange naturally wouldn't refuse. "Of course, I also want to." Tianqiao smiled. "That's good. You can chat with your brother-in-law first. I'll be back soon." "Okay." Tianqiao went to the kitchen, leaving only the 2 of them in the main room. Meng Sigue said, "Fellow Daoist Mo, please take a seat." However, he didn't dare to call her name directly because her cultivation level was much higher than his. In front of her, he felt pressured. After the two of them sat down, Mo Tiange showed a faint smile and said, "Since brother-in-law and Tianqiao are husband and wife, we're family. There's no need to call me fellow Daoist, you can directly call me by my name." Although she still didn't trust Meng Sigüe, she was still willing to get closer to him out of consideration for Tianqiao's feelings. Meng Sigüe heaved a sigh of relief at these words. The difference between the 5th layer of the aura refining realm and the 10th layer was too big. Although he was indeed Mo Tiange's brother-in-law in name, he was still a bit worried. Mo Tiange didn't take him seriously at all. With these words, at the very least, he had a rough idea of how he should interact with the other party. In addition, his mind became active again. Tianqiao's younger sister has already reached the 10th layer of the aura refining realm at such a young age. Could it be that she has some kind of backer? If that was the case, if he could get her help, Meng Sigüe smiled and said, "Since that's the case, I won't be polite." He paused for a moment then asked, "I didn't have time to ask just now, but Tiange, how did you two recognize each other?" Mo Tiange said, "When I came to your shop yesterday, I already had some suspicions, but I didn't dare to be sure. Today, I couldn't help but come again. In the end, when I asked, it turned out to be true. Speaking of which, even I can't believe it. Kunmo is so big, yet we actually met yesterday." Meng Sigüe paused for a moment, then an astonished expression appeared on his face. "So you're the one from yesterday?" There were many customers in the shop these past 2 days, and Mo Tiange was disguised yesterday, so he didn't remember. Mo Tiange smiled and nodded. "That's me." Meng Sigüe shook his head. "I really couldn't tell. If brother-in-law could tell, I'd cry. I've also put in a lot of effort to disguise myself as a man. It's more convenient to dress up as a man when we're outside." "That's true." Meng Sigüe nodded. "People's hearts are sinister, so we should be more vigilant. Tianqiao usually stays behind to look after the shop. If the market square wasn't strictly managed, I wouldn't feel at ease." Based on what he said, he seemed to have some true feelings for Tianqiao, but Mo Tiange didn't know whether he was telling the truth or lying. Mo Tiange pondered for a moment then said with a smile, "Brother-in-law, I heard from Tianqiao that you opened this shop because of your family's hereditary craftsmanship." Meng Sigüe waved his hand with a smile. "It's just to make a living." He then sighed and said, "I don't have any other skills, my aptitude isn't good, and I don't have a clan to rely on. My path of cultivation is very difficult, so I can only let Tianqiao live with me through this kind of bitter life. I'm really sorry for her." Mo Tiange comforted him. "Brother-in-law, why are you discouraged? You're still young, so there's always hope." Meng Sigüe said, "I know what I'm doing. The shop's profits are meager, and I can't rest for even a day. I don't have time, and I don't have enough spirit stones. Compared to you, Tiange, I'm really too ashamed to show my face." Mo Tiange showed a faint smile. "It's also luck. In fact, my aptitude is also very poor." "Oh." Meng Sigüe was surprised. "Tiange, you're still young, but you're already in the 10th layer of the aura refining realm. How could you? I'm endowed with 5 spiritual roots. Can brother-in-law believe me? I just had some fated chances. As for building my foundation, to be honest, I don't have much hope." When Tianqiao came back, she saw the two of them chatting happily. They were both cultivators, so they naturally talked about cultivation. Meng Sigüe had a lot of questions about cultivation that he couldn't figure out, so he brought them up to discuss. Mo Tiange saw that his words were pleasing to the eye, so she patiently told him about her experiences. Meng Sigüe's comprehension was pretty good, he wasn't a stupid person. It seemed he was also troubled by his spiritual roots. Tianxiao returned to the main room with a plate of food and placed a small bowl of noodles in front of Mo Tiange. Mo Tiange was stunned. After a long time, she heaved a sigh of relief and said with a nostalgic expression, "Meat noodles." She remembered that when they went out as children, they always liked to order a bowl of meat noodles from the snack stalls in town. Eating one bowl wasn't enough, but because they wanted to save some space in their stomachs, they didn't dare to eat a second bowl. Mo Tianxiao looked at her and smiled. Her eyes were faintly shining. "It took me a long time to learn. Try it." She took a bite and nodded. "It's delicious. It's the same as before." In fact, she had long forgotten what meat noodles tasted like. The days in Mo family's village were too distant, so distant that she forgot to recall them. Gradually, she forgot some things. But she never forgot that feeling. Tianxiao, who gave her true love during her lonely days, was something she would remember for the rest of her life. After they finished eating and chatted for a while, Mo Tiange stood up and said goodbye. Mo Tianxiao complained, "Since you're just passing by, you might as well stay at my place." Mo Tiange smiled and shook her head. "You don't have enough space here, so I won't add to your troubles. How about you rest for a few days and go to an inn to talk?" Tianxiao hesitated for a moment before nodding. "That's fine. I understand." Before leaving, Mo Tiange took out a jade bottle from her Qinkuan bag. "I don't need this bottle of medicinal pills anymore, so I'll give it to you." Tianxiao paused for a moment before firmly pushing it back. "Who do you think I am? We're sisters. Since we met in a foreign place, we should naturally get together. There's no need to be so polite." Mo Tiange smiled and said, "You'll know once you go back and ask your husband. I'm in the peak stage of the aura refining realm now, so these medicinal pills are already useless to me. I'm just giving them to you so they don't take up too much space. Even if you don't accept them, I still have to sell them. Why should I let others take advantage of me? Besides, it's just a bottle of medicinal pills. Why are you being so polite? Who do you think I am? Just accept it. Let me show you our sisterly affection." Tianxiao was finally moved. She said helplessly, "All right, I can't outtalk you." Mo Tiange stuffed the jade bottle into her hand. "I'll go first. There's only one inn in this town. Just go there and find me. By the way, the name I'm using now is Yi Shao Tian." Chapter 77. By the time she left, it was already late at night. The shops in the market square had long been closed, and there were only a few scattered lights on the street. Under these faint lights, Mo Tiange slowly walked towards the inn. That night, she talked with Tianxiao about many things that happened after they parted. The two of them were no longer the little girls from back then, and the image of each other was also very different from the image in her memory. Many things had to be talked about in detail. Just like how she couldn't adapt to Tianxiao becoming so gentle, Tianxiao also didn't expect she would live like a man now. She recalled how Tianxiao was passionate and lively while she was quiet. No one expected the next time they met would be like this. The affairs of the world were truly unpredictable. In addition, Mo Tiange deliberately observed her husband. Meng Sigue was very polite to her but not overly affectionate. Although he wasn't very considerate to Tianxiao, he wasn't bad. She secretly asked Tianxiao whether Meng Sigue was good to her or not. Tianxiao only sighed and said this was the nature of a husband and wife. At first, their love was strong, but gradually, it was worn away by life. Meng Sigue didn't treat her badly, but he was a cultivator and she was a mortal, so he inevitably looked down on her. Upon hearing this, Mo Tiange knew she shouldn't intervene between husband and wife, so she didn't say anything. In fact, she roughly understood Meng Sigui's mentality. He gave up the glory and wealth of the secular world and came to Kunwu because he wanted to take a step forward on the path of cultivation. However, his aptitude wasn't good and his life was difficult, so he was naturally depressed and cared less about the people around him. However, thinking about it, she still felt a bit disheartened. Tianxiao had been married for only 4 or 5 years, but their love had already faded. If they were cultivators, they would spend most of their time cultivating. After hundreds of years, how much love could they have left? Wouldn't it be very sad if they became strangers? Thinking up to this point, she smiled bitterly in her heart. Sure enough, it was better not to get involved in matters of the heart. If she was like Tianxiao, wholeheartedly attached to someone but couldn't get the same treatment, she would rather be alone for the rest of her life. Not far from the inn, Mo Tiange looked up and suddenly stopped. 2 figures came out of the inn and sneakily disappeared into the darkness. If they were other people, she definitely wouldn't poke her nose into other people's business. However, she happened to know these 2 people. One of them was Jiang Qingxian and the other was his follower, a short youth. She stood there and thought for a moment. Then, she made a prompt decision to retract her aura and follow them. Jiang Qingxian was at the critical juncture of building his foundation, but instead of staying on Mount Yunwu, he appeared here. There had to be a reason. In addition, she also heard that this person relied on the fact that he had a core formation elder. Although he had cultivation-level treasures, he didn't necessarily have any divine abilities, so she was confident she wouldn't be discovered. The 2 of them also retracted their auras and ran madly. Mo Tiange had to spend quite a bit of effort to follow behind them at a distance that was neither too far nor too close. He didn't know what these 2 people's goal was, but they ran for 2 hours straight, and he almost lost them a few times. 2 hours later, they entered a call and the 2 finally slowed down. Seeing as they didn't notice her presence at all, she cautiously approached them. The 2 of them seemed to be looking for something. After circling around, Jiang Qingxian impatiently asked, "Are you sure it's here?" When the short man heard this, he replied in a flattering tone, "Senior brother Jiang, I did see that kid running here. His cave residence should be nearby. Then hurry up and look for it." As if he hadn't expected that Jiang Qingxian would hand over the hard work to him just like that, the shorty sounded somewhat unwilling. "What's wrong?" "And nothing. Senior brother Jiang, please wait here for a moment. I'm going to scout around. And, go quickly." Soon after, the shorty reluctantly left, leaving Jiang Qingxian alone in this place. Mo Tiange pondered for a moment then decided to stay where she was. No matter what happened, this person would eventually come back to look for Jiang Qingxian, so she might as well just wait here. From their conversation just now, she could roughly guess that they seemed to be looking for trouble with someone. However, this shouldn't be their purpose for coming from Mount Yunwu. Because the spiritual aura in this call was meager, the person who built his Immortal's cave here should be an individual cultivator. She didn't believe they would run all the way from Mount Yunwu just to deal with an individual cultivator. There must be some other reason. From what she saw, it wasn't hard to guess that they must have had a conflict with someone in the market square when they passed by this area. Then, they suddenly decided to teach that person a lesson. After a long time, the shorty who was instructed by Jiang Qingxian to scout still hadn't returned. Jiang Qingxian seemed to be somewhat impatient, so he stood up and looked around for a while before muttering, "Why is this guy so slow?" Right now, Jiang Qingxian was completely defenseless. If they wanted to kill him, it would be a heaven-sent opportunity. However, Mo Tiange wasn't Su Jingji. During the turmoil caused by the destruction of Yunwu sect, she didn't suffer any losses, so she didn't have any hatred towards Jiang clan. Besides, although this place wasn't Mount Yunwu, Jiang clan still had 2 core formation seniors. If they found out, they'd be in big trouble. She definitely wouldn't do such a stupid thing. After a while, when Jiang Qingxian couldn't sit still anymore, there was finally some movement. Senior Marshal Brother Jiang, I found it. The shorty hurriedly ran over and gestured in a certain direction. It's over there, but that formation is very powerful. Humph. Jiang Qingxian said arrogantly, with the heaven-breaking mirror in my hand, there's no formation I can't break. The shorty nodded repeatedly. Yes, yes, Senior Marshal Brother Jiang. Shall we go now? Lead the way. Heaven-breaking mirror. Mo Tiange couldn't help but frown. Second uncle once told her there was a type of unorthodox magic weapon or spirit tool that specialized in breaking formations. Could this heaven-breaking mirror be one of them? Still following behind them, Mo Tiange didn't walk too far before she discovered traces of a formation among a mountain rock. This formation was called the Clear Sky and White Sun Formation. It was a rarely seen formation with extreme yang power and wasn't a common formation. Its power was comparable to her 5 elements life and death formation, but it was slightly inferior in terms of hiding traces. Of course, this was only in her eyes. If she didn't have a foundation in formations, she would have to spend a lot of effort to discover it. Apparently, the master of this formation was also a talented person. The formation wasn't simple, and the place where it was laid was also good. The two of them stood outside the formation and no longer hid their spiritual auras. Jiang Qingxian signaled the shorty to shout, "Brat, your grandfather's here. Quickly come out and accept your death." After shouting, he waited for a while, but there was no movement at all. The shorty continued to shout, "Surnamed Wei, don't think we can't do anything if you don't come out. My senior martial brother Jiang has a spirit tool that specializes in breaking formations. If you don't want to die, obediently come out and hand over the constitution-enhancing pills, then we'll spare your life." Mo Tiange was stunned. Constitution-enhancing pills? Could it be that these two people took a fancy to someone else's medicinal pill, so they came to rob it? Speaking of medicinal pills, although she didn't concoct them, she knew a lot about them. However, she had never heard of constitution-enhancing pills. Judging from Jiang Qingxian and the shorty's behavior, it probably wasn't a simple medicinal pill. At this time, an angry voice finally came from inside the formation. "So it's you guys." The shorty laughed shrilly and said, "Isn't that your grandfather? What do you think? Hand over the medicinal pills and we'll let you live. Don't even think about it." The voice became increasingly angry and sneered. "Don't you want to rob me of my constitution-enhancing pills? In your dreams. If you have the ability, then come and take them yourself." Humph. You refuse a toast only to drink a forfeit. You better think it through. Faced with this threat, the person inside the formation snorted coldly and no longer spoke. The shorty turned his head and looked at Jiang Qingxian to ask for advice. "Senior Marshal Brother Jiang." Jiang Qingxian hesitated for a moment before a stern expression appeared on his face. He said in a low voice, "Kill. He's just an individual cultivator. We must get our hands on the constitution-enhancing pills in his hands. We'll just kill him." Mo Tiange was quite far away, so she could only vaguely hear what he said. However, when she heard the word "kill," she was slightly surprised. Cultivators cherished their lives, so they rarely fought with their lives. Unless there was a grudge between them or if there was enough profit involved, they wouldn't easily kill each other. This cultivator said they came to kill him because they coveted the constitution-enhancing pills in his hands. What was this constitution-enhancing pill in the end? If this cultivator was really an individual cultivator, they would be in danger today. Jiang Qingxian had already cultivated to the 10th layer of the aura refining realm, and the shorty beside him was also in the 8th layer of the aura refining realm. In addition, Jiang Qingxian definitely had a treasure on him. If this person fought against them, the odds were against him. At this moment, Jiang Qingxian took out his spirit tool. Sure enough, it was a mirror. Presumably, it was the heaven-breaking mirror they were talking about. The mirror shone on the formation. In the absence of light and moonlight, a blue light shot out from the mirror and fell on the mountain rocks. Suddenly, a burst sound came from several places. A formation disc flew out. Mo Tiange was shocked. She didn't expect this spirit tool to be so powerful. She calculated in her heart. If it was her 5 elements life and death formation, it probably wouldn't be able to block this mirror for long. After the formation was broken, an immortal's cave suddenly appeared between the mountain rocks. Jiang Qingxian and Mo Tiange glanced at each other, then cautiously stepped inside. Mo Tiange didn't move from her hiding place. She hesitated for a moment, but in the end, she decided not to meddle in other people's business. This wasn't something she could meddle in. She also couldn't afford to provoke Jiang Qingxian. The sound of fighting came from inside the immortal's cave. It didn't last long before she heard a scream from inside. She didn't know if the individual cultivator had already been killed. However, the sound of fighting continued. After a long time, the sound finally stopped. A person covered in blood staggered out of the cave. Mo Tiange focused her gaze and saw that it was Jiang Qingxian. Once Jiang Qingxian came out of the immortal's cave, he immediately used light body technique and flew away. This scene puzzled Mo Tiange. Could it be that he suffered a great loss? She waited patiently for a while, but there was still no movement from the immortal's cave. After thinking for a moment, she secretly used her divine sense to probe the immortal's cave. Soon after, she was stunned. There was no one alive in the immortal's cave. After confirming there was no one else in the surroundings, she came out of her hiding place, took out her greenwood sword and walked towards the immortal's cave. Once she entered, she saw a mess. Their fight of magical powers was obviously very fierce. The immortal's cave was already beyond recognition. Fragments of rocks and walls were everywhere. There were 2 corpses on the ground. One was the short man who was with Jiang Qingxian, and the other was an unfamiliar cultivator. Presumably, he was the one surnamed Wei they mentioned. Mo Tiange approached them and carefully examined them. Neither of them had a Qinquan bag on them. Apparently, Jiang Qingxian had taken them. She also didn't know what the constitution-enhancing pills they were talking about were, but in the blink of an eye, these 2 people actually fought to their deaths. After observing her surroundings, Mo Tiange saw a bookshelf lying on the ground among the rock fragments. She then picked up a jade slip that was still intact. Because she was worried Jiang Qingxian would return, she didn't even dare to deal with the corpses. She left the immortal's cave, circled around the mountain, and casually looked for a place to hide. Chapter 78. Mo Tiange laid a concealment formation and hid herself inside it. She stared at the jade slip in her hand and sighed. She felt she was becoming more and more cold-blooded. She still remembered that when she was a child, she always liked to read books in the ancestral hall's library. At that time, what she envied the most were the chivalrous heroes in the novels. They were skilled in martial arts, wielded swords, and traveled the world. Now that she had a cultivation level, she realized she couldn't even compare to the secular chivalrous heroes. Perhaps it could be said that this was the iron rule of the cultivation world. There were only immortals and no chivalrous heroes. There were also the few remaining righteousness and eternal benefits. Thinking of this, she couldn't help but laugh at herself. Why did she have to find excuses for herself? She was clear about what she could and couldn't do. She didn't want to be a bad person, but she also wouldn't casually be a good person. There were some things she shouldn't meddle in if she didn't have the ability. Otherwise, not only would it be useless, but it would also bring disaster to herself. Besides, in this world where everyone pursued their own interests, she didn't think she could change anything. The only thing she could restrain was herself. After calming down, she separated a strand of her divine sense and entered the jade slip. This jade slip was filled with densely packed words. She skimmed through them, but she was stunned. The content was the constitution-enhancing pill they mentioned. The jade slip wrote that constitution-enhancing pill was a miraculous medicinal pill passed down from the distant past era. If taken together with other medicinal pills, the effect would be enhanced, regardless of whether the medicinal pill was taken by an aura-refining cultivator or a nascent soul cultivator. What was even rarer was that most of the materials weren't rare. Only a few kinds of spiritual plants required a high age. Aside from some heaven-defying miraculous pills, this effect was simply unparalleled. According to the jade slip, if a cultivator took one during the foundation building realm or core formation realm, it was equivalent to increasing their chances of making a realm breakthrough. Mo Tiange was so excited that she felt a bit dizzy. She really didn't know where the cultivator Jiang Qingxian killed obtained it and how Jiang Qingxian knew about it. After a while, she finally calmed down and thought of several problems. First, this constitution-enhancing pill had such a miraculous effect, so she absolutely couldn't let others know about it. Otherwise, her poor life would be in danger. Second, she didn't know how to concoct medicinal pills, and she couldn't give this thing to others. Did she have to learn concocting medicinal pills? The first problem wasn't difficult to solve. She wasn't a flamboyant person anyway, so she'd just keep this pill recipe for later. However, the second question made her hesitate for a moment. One had to know that the path of alchemy was not simple. Alchemists were all made up of countless herbs. The feeling of the ingredients, the control of the heat, and even the timing of opening the furnace were all inexplicable knowledge. One had to go through countless times of opening the furnace to slowly master it. Therefore, generally, powerful alchemists were cultivated by cultivation sects or large cultivation clans. Among small clans and rogue cultivators, alchemists were not only rare, but also had a low success rate. Although Mo Tiange felt that she could still be considered wealthy at present, it was still too difficult for her to train a concoctions master with just 3,000 spirit stones. Besides, she still didn't know whether she had the talent or not. After studying it for a while, she frowned, put away the jade slip, and looked outside. She sensed someone approaching. After a while, sure enough, someone hurriedly ran over. It was Jiang Qingxian. Mo Tiange pondered for a moment. She guessed that Jiang Qingxian might have come back for the jade slip in her hand. Two people must have died just now, so he was nervous and left in a hurry. Now that he thought about it, he came back to search. Now that the jade slip was in her hands, she naturally wouldn't take it out. Presumably, she didn't leave any traces at the scene, so there shouldn't be any flaws. She calmed down and waited. Sure enough, after a while, Jiang Qingxian left flustered and exasperated. He simply didn't notice that Oriole, had been following him, that mantis. With a faint smile, she continued to study the pill recipe. To be honest, she didn't take Jiang Qingxian seriously at all. He was merely a hedonistic young master. Although he had a cultivation level and treasures, he didn't like cultivating and liked to order others around, so his fighting skills were definitely not good. The fact that she followed him for so long without being discovered was proof. In this pill recipe, snow gall flower, young locking grass, seven-leaf lotus, were all common spiritual plants. Only purple Ganoderma and green fern that were more than 500 years old were difficult to find. After studying it for a while, she realized that this constitution-enhancing pill wasn't as easy to obtain as she imagined. Two 500-year-old spiritual plants weren't that easy to find. Moreover, the probability of failure in concocting the pill. Normally, she definitely couldn't afford it. However, it was definitely necessary when she was trying to break through a bottleneck or make a realm breakthrough. Thinking up to this point made her happy again. Although her cultivation speed wasn't fast, she could still maintain the standard of 3 spiritual roots. The difficult part was making a realm breakthrough. Taking the current situation as an example, wasn't this medicinal pill just right for her to build her foundation? In that case, when she returned, she would discuss with second uncle whether she wanted to learn pill concocting or not. With this constitution-enhancing pill, she would have a higher chance of building her foundation. With this thought in mind, she put away the jade slip and simply sat down to meditate. Because of the change in the spiritual aura inside her body, she didn't dare to continue cultivating. However, her dantian and meridians were still the same as before. That cold spiritual aura didn't have any effect on them, which made her feel slightly relieved. Soon, she entered a meditative state. She felt as if she had melted into heaven and earth. There were no emotions, no thoughts, no joy, anger, sorrow, or joy. Even her body seemed to have ceased to exist. The only thing left behind was her slow and rhythmic breathing. It was as if she was a feather fluttering in the air, but it was also as if she had become one with heaven and earth until she couldn't even feel time. By the time she woke up from her meditative state, it was already daytime. She stood up and straightened her clothes, then used the light body technique to rush towards the market square. Of course, she took a big detour along the way so that no one would notice where she came from. Before long, she returned to the inn. A waiter came to greet her. "Master Immortal, you're finally back. There's a guest looking for you." Oh. Mo Tiange thought for a moment. It was probably Tianqiao. They made an appointment yesterday, so she asked, "Where is she?" The waiter eagerly led the way. "She's waiting here. It's a young lady. This way, please." The waiter led Mo Tiange upstairs and lifted the curtain of the private room. Sure enough, it was Tianqiao. Tianqiao was sitting alone by the window. Upon seeing Mo Tiange coming in, she smiled. Mo Tiange also smiled back. Upon seeing the waiter's strange gaze, she suddenly felt a bit helpless. She was wearing men's clothes while Tianqiao was dressed like a married woman. They didn't look like husband and wife. This waiter was probably guessing their relationship. Mo Tiange took out a piece of gold and threw it to the waiter. "Thank you." This piece of gold weighed no less than 2 taels. The waiter immediately smiled and nodded repeatedly. "It's nothing. Is there anything else, young master? Please tell me." Mo Tiange shook her head. "There's nothing else. You can go." The waiter nodded and bowed before reluctantly leaving. Once the waiter left, Tianqiao looked at Mo Tiange with a smile. "You're really generous. You can casually give out gold." Mo Tiange smiled. "How could I be generous? It's just that for cultivators, gold and silver are no different from mud and stones. Let's go to my room." Tianqiao nodded, then followed Mo Tiange all the way to the backyard. It wasn't until they entered the room that Tianqiao cautiously said, "I still have to thank you for yesterday's medicinal pills." Mo Tiange shook her head. "I already thanked you yesterday. Why are you still being so polite to me?" "It's not that I'm being polite. Yesterday, my husband told me that the medicinal pills you gave me were aura converging pills. Each bottle is worth no less than 200 spirit stones. We opened this small shop and we only earn this much in a year. It's really too precious." Seeing how persistent Tianqiao was, Mo Tiange had no choice but to say, "All right, I'll accept your thanks. In fact, if it was several months ago, I definitely wouldn't have been willing to sell them. However, I've already reached the peak stage of the aura refining realm, so these aura refining medicinal pills are no longer of any use to me. You don't need to worry too much about it. Tianxiao couldn't help but laugh. Just now, you said you were generous, but now you don't even take a few hundred spirit stones seriously. If you keep saying that, you'll have to be careful of me knocking you from time to time. Mo Tiange was stunned. The two of them smiled at each other and tacitly stopped talking about it. Right, I prepared something for you. Tianxiao lifted the bundle in her hands. What is it? Tianxiao smiled mysteriously but didn't answer. Instead, she just opened the bundle. Inside the bundle were a comb, a mirror, various hairpins, and other miscellaneous items. Mo Tiange was puzzled. This is, Tianxiao pulled her up and pushed her to the table. While propping up the mirror, she said with a smile, didn't you say you've been dressing as a man for 10 years? I think you must have forgotten how to dress up. Before, you always helped me, so let me help you this time. Ha! Sit properly. Tianxiao let go of Mo Tiange's hair and exclaimed in admiration, you cultivators are good like this, you don't need to take care of yourself. Look at your hair. I'm sure you've never taken care of it, but it's so soft and smooth. Mo Tiange also smiled. You're also a natural beauty, why do you have to talk about me? Even if I'm a natural beauty, I still have to dress up. Mortals can't compare to cultivators. Why don't you think about it? Are there ugly women among cultivators? Every one of them is as beautiful as a flower. Just you wait, I guarantee you'll stare at yourself until you're stupefied. Tianxiao quickly combed Mo Tiange's hair and began to tie it up. A moment later, Mo Tiange stared at her reflection in the mirror. Sure enough, she was in a daze. The face in the mirror had beautiful eyebrows and eyes. It had a gentleness that men didn't have, but it also had a heroic spirit that women lacked. The combination of these two made her look even more beautiful and bright. Tianxiao moved closer with satisfaction. She looked at the two similar faces in the mirror and said, ever since I was a child, I've always thought you looked better than me. Look at how beautiful you look. Mo Tiange shook her head. I feel really strange. Don't. Tianxiao hastily stopped Mo Tiange's hand from wiping her face. She said in confusion, I'm the one who feels strange. Why do you have to dress as a man? I've been in Kunwo for 2 or 3 years now, and there are many female cultivators here. Although they indeed can't compare to male cultivators, cultivators respect the strong. No one would dare to bully a powerful female cultivator. This question made Mo Tiange smile bitterly. But right now, I'm still far from being powerful. There are so many high-level male cultivators. If there were 1 or 2. I don't want to be a concubine or a human furnace. Tianxiao said, I understand what you mean, but high-level cultivators rarely appear in the outside world. You also have a school to back you up, so there shouldn't be anyone who would dare to rob you, right? Furthermore, my husband once said that although cultivators can't truly purify their hearts and reduce their desires, they'll still try their best to suppress their desires in the secular world. Only those who are lecherous and have power would want concubines. As for human furnaces, in the righteous path, anyone who uses human furnaces to cultivate is looked down upon, so there aren't many people who want human furnaces. Mo Tiange naturally understood these principles better than Tianxiao, but, she sighed and said, then do you know about dual cultivation? Tianxiao nodded. However, Mo Tiange heard Mo Tiange say, although dual cultivation is beneficial to both of us, I don't want to lose my own choice. She hesitated for a moment before continuing, besides, other people only look down upon those who use human furnaces because they don't have much use for them. If there are enough benefits, they wouldn't care about being looked down upon. Tianxiao heard the hidden meaning behind Mo Tiange's words. You're saying, Mo Tiange was somewhat hesitant. Second uncle said that this matter must never be known by anyone else but Tianxiao. She said, "My constitution is special. Reportedly, it's very suitable for dual cultivation or human furnaces, so, it's fine if you hear about this, but you can't even tell your husband. If other people find out, it'll be a huge disaster for me." Mo Tiange's emphasis shocked Tianxiao. "It's that serious?" Mo Tiange nodded cautiously. Mo Tiange was willing to tell Tianxiao because their friendship wasn't ordinary, so she believed Tianxiao wouldn't divulge it. Secondly, Tianxiao didn't have much contact with cultivators. Meng Sigue was the only one she didn't care about. Furthermore, the two of them didn't know which cultivation group she was in. The name Yi Xiaotian alone was too common. Even if it was leaked, they wouldn't be able to find it in a short time. Moreover, she had long prepared to leave Yunwu's sect after building her foundation. Chapter 79. After staying in the market square for a few days, Mo Tiange left. Although she recognized Tianxiao, they walked different paths after all. Tianxiao wouldn't leave her husband, and she didn't have the ability to protect them, so it was better for them to go their separate ways. Except for the first day, Mo Tiange didn't see Meng Sigue again. However, she gave several bottles of aura-nourishing pills and some cultivation notes to Tianxiao before leaving. Tianxiao didn't have spiritual roots, so she couldn't make Tianxiao a cultivator. She just hoped that Meng Sigue would treat Tianxiao better in the future because of these medicinal pills or because he was afraid of her cultivation level. After flying north for several days, she finally arrived at the gate of Tiandao sect. Among the 7 great cultivation groups in the Celestial Pole, except for Zhengfa School, which was located in the northernmost glacier area, the other 6 were in Kunwu. The 2 largest cultivation groups, Tiandao sect and Xianqing School, were located in the east and west. Tiandao sect was located in the northeast of Kunwu, separated from the Devil Path by a mountain. According to rumors in the Celestial Pole, the founder of Tiandao sect was a genius. 10,000 years ago, during the war between the righteous and the Devil Path, his name shook the world. Later, he led his disciples to establish a sect here. It was said that the reason he chose this place as the gate was not only to block the Devil Path's path to Kunwu, but also to train his disciples' combat ability. As it turned out, the founder of Tiandao sect indeed had a unique view. Not only did Tiandao sect's disciples not wear down the sect's strength because of the war with the Devil Path, but they also grew rapidly during the war. In fact, this phenomenon wasn't unique to Tiandao sect. Xianqing School and Gujin sect, whose strength was second only to Tiandao sect, both pursued the strategy of live in hardship and die in peace. However, their enemies weren't the Devil Path, but the demonic beasts in the surroundings. When she arrived at Mount Yuhing, where Tiandao sect was located, Mo Tiange saw Demonic Mountain from afar. Demonic Mountain was a snowy mountain tens of thousands of feet high. It was connected to Mount Yuhing, but it was more than twice as tall. At the foot of the mountain was a lush green forest. Halfway up the mountain was a layer of white. At first glance, it was pure white, towering into the clouds. It was said that Demonic Mountain was also the highest mountain in Kunwu. When Mo Tiange saw Demonic Mountain for the first time, she, like many people, sighed with emotion. The reputation of the highest mountain in Kunwu was well-deserved. But at the same time, she had a complicated feeling. This was the place where her father died. As for her father, whom she had never met, she still had feelings of admiration for him. When he was a child, his mother always said that his father was a very gentle person, and when the other villagers mentioned his father, they would always praise him for being very capable. Later, when they arrived in Kunwu, Yi Jingwen said his father was very famous in West Kunwu, and second uncle respected and loved his father even more. Therefore, in her heart, her father was a successful cultivator, as well as a competent elder brother and husband. Sometimes, she couldn't help but think that if her father was still alive, would she not have to suffer all these years? But every time she thought of this, she would warn herself not to be too greedy. Second uncle had already been good enough to her. He had taken on the responsibility of a parent and raised her. In order for her to cultivate in peace, he had worked hard to earn spirit stones. For her safety, he had taken her to wander around. It could be said that in these 10 years, second uncle had lived for her. What did she have to complain about? The small town at the foot of Mount Yuheng had gathered countless cultivators because of the Tiandao sect's illustrious reputation. The streets were neat, the shops were luxurious, and countless cultivators were shuttling back and forth at the foot of the mountain. Most of these cultivators were ore refining cultivators, but there were also many foundation building cultivators. Occasionally, she could even see 1 or 2 core formation cultivators. This was an eye-opener for Mo Tiange. Sure enough, Tiandao sect wasn't an ordinary cultivation group. Compared to it, Yunwu sect was simply a rural place. Fellow Daoist, wait. She was strolling on the street when she suddenly heard a voice behind her. Then, it seemed like someone was rushing towards her. She stepped aside and dodged. Ah! The person fell to the ground. It was a very ordinary-looking teenager. His appearance was ordinary, his clothes were ordinary, and his cultivation level was only in the 7th layer of the aura refining realm. There was almost nothing special about him. The teenager crawled up, ignoring her vigilant expression, and said with a smile, "Fellow Daoist, you have a fast reaction." Mo Tiange glanced at him and discreetly put some distance between them. She said faintly, "What's the matter?" Her attitude was cold, but the teenager didn't care at all. He still said with a smile, "I'm He Bishing. I don't need fellow Daoist's name." Mo Tiange frowned slightly and answered, "My surname is Yi." "Fellow Daoist, what can I do for you?" "Oh, turns out it's fellow Daoist Yi. I don't dare to hope for you, but it seems you're also here to participate in the Immortal's assembly, right?" "Me too, and so are many of my friends. Since we all have the same goal, why don't we get together and talk about our experiences?" The words of the teenager who called himself He Bishing made Mo Tiange speechless. She hadn't said anything yet, but this person was really talking to himself. However, he mentioned the Immortal's assembly. Did Tiandao sect happen to be holding an Immortal's assembly? No wonder there were so many people here. "Fellow Daoist Yi, let's go together. It's better to make a last-minute effort than not, right? If we miss this opportunity, we'll have to wait for another 10 years. Although our cultivation levels aren't high, we might have a better chance if we communicate with each other." Although the teenager looked sincere, Mo Tiange wasn't moved in the slightest. She only said, "Thank you for your kindness, but there's no need." I want it." The teenager didn't seem to notice her refusal and was still very enthusiastic. "Fellow Daoist, you don't have to be so polite. We're all individual cultivators, so communicating with each other is better than nothing. Come, let's go this way." He was about to lead the way, but after taking 2 steps, he turned around and stared at her anxiously. Mo Tiange felt helpless. After thinking that she really didn't have any plans, she shook her head and followed him. Seeing that she was willing to follow him, the teenager smiled even more happily. He led her left and right, talking endlessly as they walked. "Fellow Daoist Yi, you seem to be about the same age as me, but your cultivation level is actually in the 10th layer. That's really amazing. Could it be that you're a disciple of a cultivation clan?" Mo Tiange shook her head. "I'm not. In fact, she should be 3 or 4 years older than this teenager. It was just that she was small, so people always mistook her for a man." Ah, that's even more amazing, the teenager said enviously. Fellow Daoist, you must have outstanding talents, so you might be able to enter Tian Dao's sect without having to take the test. Mo Tiange didn't answer. She was now 20 years old, but her cultivation level was already in the peak stage of the aura refining realm. Even among the elite disciples of big cultivation groups, her cultivation level wasn't bad. However, she clearly knew that her fast cultivation wasn't because of talents, but because of medicinal pills. If it wasn't for Second Uncle's full support and the many rewards she received from Yunwu sect, it would be considered good if she could have the same cultivation level as this teenager. Fellow Daoist Yi, I have 2 friends who are also participating in the Immortals Assembly. Their cultivation levels are a bit higher than mine. The 3 of us usually only cultivate hard and rarely communicate with others. We're also not proficient in fights of magical powers. Now that the Immortals Assembly is about to begin, we need to have some means to survive, not to mention winning. We have no other choice, so we want to communicate with others and make more preparations. In any case, we can't lose our lives. The teenager chattered endlessly. Mo Tiange didn't know what he was saying until the end. Soon, the topic was diverted to who knows where, but the teenager never stopped talking. Ah, we're here. Finally, the teenager stopped in front of an ordinary door and knocked on it. Mo Tiange heaved a sigh of relief. Although she pretended she didn't hear anything, it was still quite annoying to have someone talking next to her. Soon, the door opened. A tall teenager stood behind the door. Upon seeing this person, the teenager promptly said, "Big Brother Huang, I brought a guest." When the teenager saw Mo Tiange standing behind him, he also smiled. "Fellow Daoist, welcome, welcome. Come in quickly." After she stepped through the door, she saw that it looked like an ordinary house with a small courtyard and a person was sitting in the hall. The door behind her closed with a bang and the teenager said, "Fellow Daoist, please come in." When Mo Tiange walked into the hall, the slightly chubby teenager also stood up. "Fellow Daoist," the teenager took a step forward and introduced her. "Fellow Daoist Yi, this is my big brother. His name is He Bisho." "Big brother, this is fellow Daoist Yi I met today. He's about the same age as me, but his cultivation level is already in the 10th layer. He's really amazing." The teenager called He Bisho was slightly surprised. "So it's fellow Daoist Yi. Second brother, you're pretty good today. You actually brought back a 10th layer fellow Daoist." "Of course." The teenager smiled proudly and politely welcomed her. "Fellow Daoist Yi, please sit and have a cup of tea first. Big brother Huang, come quickly." "I'm coming." The teenager surnamed Huang hastily walked into the room. Mo Tiange sat on the guest seat and took the spiritual tea the teenager handed her. She slowly blew on the tea and took a sip. She thought that this teenager's big brother, He Bisho, and the teenager surnamed Huang were both in the 9th layer, so they seemed to have put in a lot of effort. If she had enough spirit stones as her backing, she should have a high chance of winning the Immortals Assembly. When she put down the teacup, the 3 people in front of her became even happier. Mo Tiange calmly looked at the door then asked, "Fellow Daoists, why are you so happy?" The 3 people who were staring at her and laughing didn't stop. No one answered her question. The 3 of them glanced at each other then the teenager said, Big brother Huang, are you satisfied with today's goods?" He Bisho nodded repeatedly. "Not bad. Not only is this boy's cultivation level high, but his skin is also soft and tender. Later, if he's sold to a high-level female cultivator or a lecherous cultivator, we'll definitely be able to sell him for a lot of money." As they spoke, the 3 people once again laughed at each other. Their laughter was extremely vulgar. Mo Tiange wrinkled her brows. "Fellow Daoists, what are you talking about? Still, no one answered her question. The teenager surnamed Huang also said, yes. Since this boy has such a high cultivation level at such a young age, his family must also be very wealthy. I say, Bishing, are you sure he's not someone from a cultivation clan? I'm sure he isn't, he Bishing said, look at his ordinary clothes. Moreover, do you think those young masters from cultivation clans would be as calm as him? If you put it that way, that's true. The teenager surnamed Huang nodded. It'd be great if you could find this kind of goods every time. His words made He Bishing very unconvinced. Big brother Huang, this isn't just about me. Why are you only talking about me? The teenager surnamed Huang said boldly, aren't you responsible for getting the bait? Look at what kind of goods you brought a few days ago. They don't have many spirit stones on them, and even their spirit tools are very rotten. Can you blame me for that? Although there are people everywhere, not everyone is willing to come with me. Isn't that because you're not capable enough? Enough. Seeing that He Bishing and the teenager surnamed Huang were about to quarrel, He Bishio shouted at them to stop. The two of you should also look at the time. Hurry up and get to work first. The two of them reluctantly glared at each other, then took out their respective spirit tools. Mo Tiange stared at them and said, fellow Taoists, ha. Upon seeing her like this, He Bishing laughed and finally spoke to her. Fellow Taoist Yi, could it be that none of your elders taught you that people's hearts are sinister and that you shouldn't casually follow strangers? Mo Tiange swept her gaze over the three of them. Instead of answering, she directly asked, what do you want to do? He Bishio rolled up his sleeves and said, don't be anxious. You'll know soon enough. Chapter 80. Mo Tiange slowly took another sip of tea and said, He Bishing, He Bishio. What good names. Why were you born? Why did you cultivate? Your parents were really smart. Humph. He Bishio, who didn't understand the meaning behind her words, grinned nastily and said, this sentence is used on you. You should regret meeting us. Why did your parents give birth to you? Why did they have to walk on the path of cultivation? Mo Tiange didn't move, but the corners of her mouth curled up behind the teacup. The three of them glanced at each other, then took out their spirit tools and pounced on her. At that moment, Mo Tiange stuck a talisman on her body. In the blink of an eye, she was behind the three of them. With a wave of her hand, numerous transparent flying needles shot out from between her fingers. The three of them were shocked and hastily dodged, but she was too fast. Each of them was more or less pierced by a few needles. Among them, He Bishing was the most miserable. His cultivation level was the weakest, so he realized it too late. The moment he turned around, the flying needles shot right at his chest. He simply didn't have enough time to react. These needles were as fine as cow hair. As soon as the three of them touched them, they immediately felt pain and itch where they were pierced. They turned pale with fright. He Bishing's vitals were pierced, so his body went limp and he fell to the ground. This opportunity couldn't be missed. Mo Tiange once again waved her hand, causing them to dodge in fear. However, this time, the flying needles flew in another direction. In an instant, several hidden formation discs and formation flags in the corners of the room were either destroyed or collapsed. Realizing they were tricked, the other two were flustered and exasperated. As soon as they regained their footing, they swung their spirit tools. Mo Tiange's figure was like a ghost. A sword suddenly appeared in her hand and blocked the attack. Soon after, she shook her arms and threw out both spirit tools. The two of them hastily tried to retrieve their spirit tools, but at that moment, she waved her hand again. The three of them couldn't clearly see what she threw out, but they saw thorns growing from the ground and surrounding them. In just a few breaths, the three of them were like fish on a chopping board. Mo Tiange clapped her hands and sat back in her original position. The three people in the room were entangled in the thorns, wailing incessantly. At that moment, the three of them finally felt afraid. The youths surnamed Huang and He Bixing saw that their opponent was terrifyingly fast and their spirit tools were completely useless in front of her, making them break out in cold sweat. He Bixing anxiously called out, "Dage, He Bixio didn't have time to pay attention to him. He shouted at Mo Tiange, "You! Could it be that you've been hiding your cultivation level?" Among individual cultivators, the three of them could be considered to have high cultivation levels. With the three of them working together, when had they ever been in such a difficult situation? Mo Tiange simply smiled and said coldly, "Short-sighted. Why do you need to hide your cultivation?" The strength of a battle of magical powers didn't just depend on one's cultivation level. These three people wanted to trick a newbie to rob them, but they didn't think about it. If they didn't have a clan, how could a cultivator who had cultivated to the 10th layer of aura refining still be a newbie? Mo Tiange had followed second uncle to wander around, so she'd seen fights of magical powers between foundation building cultivators many times. She also experienced several life-threatening situations in Yunwi's sect. People like them, who only dared to make a move after setting up a formation and using bewitching powder, had poor vigilance and slow reactions. They were much worse than the disciples of the three cultivation groups. How could they possibly be her match? Mo Tiange already felt strange being pestered by that youngster on the street. However, she'd experienced many fights now, so she was naturally more courageous. With just one look at his clumsy technique, she knew the other party was mediocre. In any case, since she was idle and bored, she might as well take a look. It would be best if nothing happened, but if the other party really had bad intentions, she'd just rob him instead. She just happened to need money for the pill recipe for the constitution-enhancing pill, so robbing was the fastest way to get it. However, she couldn't do this kind of thing. Now that someone was trying to deceive her, how could she just let him go? When she got closer, she discovered traces of a formation inside the room. She became even more certain that this was just a small scorching sun formation, so she didn't care about it at all. You. The youngster surnamed Huang said in astonishment, "You obviously drank some tea, so how could..." Mo Tiange raised the cup and took another sip. "Are you talking about this bewitching powder? One refreshing pill is enough." The main ingredient of bewitching powder was the fragrant jade flower. In the secular world, she was easily knocked out by someone using the fragrant jade flower. Later on, she put in some effort, so how could she not recognize it? Only now did the three of them realize that someone was pretending to be a pig to eat a tiger. The youngster surnamed Huang looked at He Bixing, who was lying on the ground, and cursed, "It's all your fault. What kind of eyes do you have? This time, we're going to die because of you." He Bixing was injured, so he couldn't speak properly. He anxiously said, "You. How could you blame me? If I don't blame you, who should I blame?" The man sneered. "You're the one who brought them back." He Bixing was so angry that his face turned red, but his injuries were the heaviest. He was so angry that he couldn't even speak. Seeing his brother like this, He Bixio angrily said, "Wang Weiren, normally, when my second brother brought people here, you always took advantage of them. You're blaming him for not doing his job, but why didn't you go yourself?" Mo Tiange couldn't help but want to laugh when she heard this name. Huang Weiren. What a waste of a human. These three names really matched each other. Huang Weiren still grumbled to himself, "How could I know he was stupid to this extent? Didn't you also not see it yourself?" That's because I trusted him." Mo Tiange didn't know whether to laugh or cry. These three people must have problems with their brains. They were still quarreling at a time like this. This made her feel very unfulfilled. She knocked on the table and said, "Are you guys done quarreling?" The two of them immediately reacted and stopped quarreling. Hibisho stared at Hibishin, who was lying on the ground and couldn't move. He struggled for a while, then begged, "Fellow Daoist Yi, Senior Yi, we had eyes but couldn't see that you were an expert. Please forgive us." Huang Weiren also said, "Yes, yes, yes. It's all our fault for being blind. We actually couldn't see that you were an expert. Please be magnanimous and don't bother with us." Mo Tiange glanced at them but didn't say anything. It was only when the three of them were scared that she finally said slowly, "Let you guys go. All right, let's talk first. How many people have you deceived? How did you deceive them?" The three of them were delighted. Hibisho and Huang Weiren also stopped quarreling. They looked at each other and pushed each other back and forth. "You tell me. You tell me. I don't remember clearly. I don't know how to talk." The two of them pushed each other back and forth for a while. In the end, it was Huang Weiren who said, "The three of us are individual cultivators living in the vicinity of Tiandao sect. We don't have any other skills and really can't afford to cultivate, so we thought of this method. There are a lot of foreign cultivators in Tiandao sect. Some of them admire the reputation of the #1 cultivation group in Kunwu, and some of them come to the market square to buy things. We thought that with so many foreign cultivators unattended, no one would find out if we deceived one or two of them, so we started this business without any capital. Your cultivation levels aren't low now, so you've been deceiving us for a long time. Didn't you run into any trouble with your meager tricks?" Huang Weiren said, "We did run into some trouble, but we've always been very careful. We didn't provoke people from Tiandao sect or people from cultivation clans. We only looked for some foreign individual cultivators. These people generally don't have much influence. There were a few powerful ones, but when we used formations and bewitching powder together, only a few of them could survive. This was reasonable. If she wasn't proficient in formations and couldn't recognize bewitching powder, she might have already fallen into their trap. With your clumsy deceit skills, some people actually fell for it." Upon hearing what Mo Tiange said, the three people present all had bitter expressions on their faces. Hibisho said, "We're also good at judging people. Some of the foreign cultivators came to Tiandao sect to exchange ideas with fellow Taoists, so we pretended to be Tiandao sect cultivators. Some of them came to buy things, so we pretended to have top-grade materials in our hands but didn't know what they were. Oh? Wasn't this very stupid? Recently, because Tiandao sect was going to hold an Immortals assembly, many cultivators came. Most of them were country bumpkins who'd never seen the world, so we, Mo Tiange, understood what he meant. There were many cultivators who'd come, and there were also many who'd never seen the world, so it was naturally easy to deceive them. Furthermore, the Immortals assembly was more chaotic than usual, so no one paid attention to it. Those guys were so pleased with themselves that they forgot themselves. Seeing that she was young and had a high cultivation level, they thought she was a country bumpkin, so they couldn't wait to take advantage of her. In that case, you must have robbed a lot of things during this time." Huang Weiren looked at her with fear. "In fact, it wasn't much," Mo Tiange smiled. "Not much? Then hand them all over. If you hand them over, I'll spare your lives." "Ha! It's fine if you don't want to hand them over. After I kill you, I'll take my time searching." Seeing the three of them struggling, her somewhat gloomy mood instantly improved. Using other people's bad luck to comfort herself was indeed very effective. Big brother, Hibishin, who was lying on the ground, said with a sullen face, I don't want to die yet." Hibisho and Huang Weiren both had struggling expressions on their faces. The two of them communicated with their eyes. Upon seeing this, Mo Tiange chuckled softly and pressed her palm down. In an instant, all the flying needles flew back to her hand, including the ones on their bodies. He Bishio and Huang Weiren were in a better condition, but He Bishing had a lot of flying needles stuck in his body. Now that the needles came out from his wounds, he immediately howled in pain. Big brother, give them to him." Upon seeing his miserable state, He Bishio hastily shouted, "Okay, we'll give all our things to you." Mo Tiange showed a faint smile. "Throw me your Qinquan bags." Although He Bishing was injured, he was still the most afraid. Trembling, he immediately threw his Qinquan bag to her. Upon seeing this, He Bishio also clenched his teeth and took out his Qinquan bag. Huang Weiren was very unwilling, but the other two people kept staring at him. After staring for a long time, he finally made up his mind and threw his Qinquan bag. Mo Tiange caught the 3 Qinquan bags, opened them and looked inside before casually stuffing them into her robe. She smiled at the 3 swindlers and robbers who were staring at her anxiously. She then took out a talisman from her Qinquan bag and threw it at them. Boom! The entire hall was surrounded by raging flames. The 3 people shouted one after another, "You didn't keep your word. Didn't you say you wouldn't kill us?" Mo Tiange turned around and walked outside. She waved her hand and said, "You didn't hand over all your belongings, so of course you can't buy your lives back. I'll just take back half of your lives." After leaving the residence, she got her bearings and leisurely walked towards the street. These 3 people obviously didn't hand over all their belongings. However, she wasn't a professional robber, so she didn't bother to care about this. Although she wouldn't kill them, she still taught them a lesson to vent her anger. The fire just now was enough to make them half dead. She walked on the street with a smile on her face. 1 escape talisman and 1 fire talisman earned her several hundred spirit stones. This business was really good. Chapter 81. After dealing with the 3 unlucky people, Mo Tiange found a place to rest. Sure enough, it was the Immortal's assembly. The streets were full of people, and several inns were all full. Mo Tiange had no choice but to spend a bit more money to rent a hut from Tiandao's sect. Soon after, she went to a shop belonging to Tiandao's sect, a medicinal hall called 100 Herbs Hall. The Immortal's assembly was approaching, so the medicinal hall was crowded with people buying all kinds of medicinal pills. There was only one corner that was empty. An old man in the 2nd layer of the aura refining realm wearing the uniform of a part-time disciple of Zisha's sect was dozing off. Mo Tiange looked at the counter. It was the corner responsible for buying and selling spiritual plants, so she walked over and knocked on the counter. The old man guarding the counter opened his eyes, looked at her, and said lazily, "Buy or sell?" Her attitude was really cold. She recalled that when she hadn't entered Yunwu's sect and her cultivation level was still very ordinary, the shop assistants in Yunwu's sect's shops also treated her politely. As the number 1 cultivation group in Kunwu, Tiandao's sect's part-time disciples were actually this arrogant. However, she was too lazy to care about this and just said, "I want to buy some spiritual plants for pill concocting." Oh. The old man glanced at her. He probably thought she was a concocting master, so he asked, "Type and quantity." Mo Tiange said, "What's the price of the materials needed for primary medicinal pills?" Oh. This sound was different from the previous one. The old man's eyes lit up. He stared at her and said, "Fellow Daoist, are you a beginner in pill concocting?" Mo Tiange nodded. There were many people who couldn't concoct medicinal pills, but there were also many people who wanted to learn pill concocting, so there was nothing to hide. The old man said, "I also have a few common pill recipes. Do you want them?" Mo Tiange originally planned to buy some pill recipes after buying them. Since he took the initiative to ask, she said, if fellow Taoist has them, I'm willing to buy them. Upon hearing this, the old man changed his cold attitude and said with a smile, of course I do. I have aura-nourishing pills, restorative panaceas, spirit-purifying pills, refreshing pills, and so on. If fellow Taoist wants them, I can sell them to you at a lower price. How about 3 spirit stones each? These pills were the most common pills in the Taoism world. Pill recipes could be found everywhere and were not rare. Therefore, their prices were very low. However, this low price was only relative to other pill recipes that could easily cost hundreds of spirit stones. 3 spirit stones wasn't a small amount for ordinary cultivation group disciples. The group only distributed about 5 spirit stones a month. Even if they worked hard to earn money, they would probably only get a dozen or so spirit stones, let alone individual cultivators. Therefore, after the old man finished speaking, he stared at Imotinga's face. Seeing that she didn't answer immediately, the old man said in a low voice, fellow Taoist, this isn't the shop's price. If you go elsewhere to buy it, it'll usually cost around 5 spirit stones. You won't be able to get it this cheap. Imotinga was silent for a while because she was used to it. She wasn't rich and overbearing, so when she bought things, she would naturally save as much as possible. Because of that, she didn't answer immediately. Instead, she thought about it for a while. Now that she heard the old man's meaning, she finally understood. This old man was selling it privately, and the spirit stones went into his own pocket. That was why he looked like this. Being stared at by her, the old man didn't feel embarrassed at all. He just smiled. Imotinga muttered to herself for a while, then said, all right. Bring me the pill recipes. I'll choose a few and you can prepare the materials for me. The old man smiled, then took out a piece of animal skin paper and handed it to her. Imotinga chose 3 or 4 pill recipes from it. The old man glanced at them, then asked, fellow Taoist, how many sets of materials do you need? Imotinga thought for a while, then said, 100 sets of each. In addition, I'll add the materials for aura nourishing pills, marrow supplementing pills, and unity divinity pills. 100 sets of each. 100 sets of materials was already a lot. The old man was a bit surprised, but he didn't say anything. He turned around, took the animal skin paper from the counter, and wrapped the spiritual plants one by one from the medicine cabinet in the back. There were also several kinds that needed to be kept fresh, so he directly took them out along with the jade boxes. These are the materials for 100 sets of medicinal pill recipes. Please take care of them. The counter was full of materials, and there were several jade slips on top of the jade boxes. Imotinga checked them. After confirming that they were indeed pill recipes, she asked, how many spirit stones do they cost? The old man's eyes shone brightly as he looked around. When he saw that no one was paying attention to them, he said, as for these materials, since you're buying so many, I'll give them a bit cheaper. 150 spirit stones. 3 sets of pill recipes cost 9 spirit stones, so the total is 159 spirit stones. Imotinga nodded. She took out spirit stones from her chinquan bag, counted them several times, and handed them over. Being a bit cautious also showed that this was already a lot of money for her, so she didn't want other people to be greedy. This place wasn't like Yunwu's sect. With second uncle here, she didn't need to worry about other people getting jealous when she spent several hundred spirit stones, because it was normal for foundation building cultivators to spend several hundred spirit stones. The old man took them with a smile. Thank you for your patronage. He earned 9 spirit stones for free, so this wasn't a small business. After putting all the materials into her chinquan bag, Imotinga asked, may I know if there are any pill furnaces for sale here? Upon hearing this question, the old man once again showed a sincere smile. Fellow Taoist, you're really asking the right question. I'll sell you some pill furnaces. Although they're not high-quality ones, they're enough for beginners. Of course, if you want to buy a high-grade pill furnace, please come to our Tiandao Sex Hall of 10,000 Tools. It's just next door. Mo Tiange said, I'm just a beginner, so I don't need a high-grade pill furnace. Let me see what kind of pill furnaces you have. The old man nodded repeatedly. He took several pill furnaces from under the counter and placed them on the counter. Please take a look. The smallest of these pill furnaces was a square foot, while the largest was a full 3 feet tall. Mo Tiange recalled Qin Shi's pill furnace she saw before. It seemed to be a foot tall, but it was full of spiritual aura. Presumably, its size shouldn't have anything to do with the finished product, so she randomly picked a small one. How many spirit stones? All of them have the same price, 15 spirit stones. Mo Tiange nodded. She counted out 15 spirit stones and put the pill furnace into her Qianquan bag. The two of them were very satisfied with the transaction. Mo Tiange left 100 Herbs Hall amidst the old man's welcome again. She didn't know why, but when she heard the old man's voice, she felt it was very similar to the courteous tone of a brothel keeper in the secular world when she saw off a guest. She couldn't help but get goosebumps. After returning to the small house she temporarily lived in, Mo Tiange laid a formation, then took out the pill furnaces she bought, cleaned them, and placed them in front of her. She then took out several books and started to read. Second uncle said that for generations, almost no one in Yi clan learned pill concocting. There were only a few concoctions masters, but that was a long time ago. Therefore, there weren't many materials on pill concocting. The few that remained were also lost when Yi clan moved out of Mount Qingmang. Fortunately, several years ago in Miwu Valley, she obtained several books. One of them was about pill concocting. The other books were good, so this one shouldn't be bad either. Thus, she took it out and compared it. The most basic medicinal pills in the aura refining realm were aura nourishing pills, so she naturally had to start concocting them. First, she picked up all kinds of materials and reviewed the precautions, the real fire for pill concocting, and the use of various hand seals. Only after she confirmed that she understood everything did she put down the book. She sat cross-legged on the praying mat and condensed her aura in her dantian. After a while, a wisp of spiritual aura naturally sprang out from her palm and instantly turned into a fiery red flame. Mo Tiange smiled when she saw the flame in her palm. This was dantian fire. Even if she didn't have fire spiritual roots, she could still release it. However, the quality of fire spiritual roots would increase the power of dantian fire. Although her spiritual roots weren't good, it was in the sense of the number of spiritual roots she had. Second uncle had tested her before, and just by looking at the pros and cons of each spiritual root, they were all pretty good. That was why she was able to force out the dantian fire so easily. She guided the spiritual aura in her hand, and the dantian fire turned into a long line. It reached the bottom of the pill furnace and quickly covered it. Soon, the pill furnace was heated up. Her free hand flicked out a wisp of spiritual aura and opened the furnace lid. She quickly threw all kinds of ingredients inside and closed the lid again. In addition, she also sent a strand of divine sense into the furnace to carefully sense the fusion of these materials. The heat of dantian fire was much higher than that of ordinary flames. Soon, the materials inside melted. At that moment, a muffled pop came from inside the furnace. Mo Tiange stopped the dantian fire, opened the lid, and stared at the materials inside the furnace gloomily. Most of these materials had melted, but they weren't perfectly mixed together. Instead, they turned into a pool of black water that sizzled and steamed. Mo Tiange heaved a sigh. She threw away all the failed concocting dregs and washed them with clear spring water before putting the pill furnace back on the table. Sure enough, concocting pills wasn't a simple matter. According to the book, although the quantity of various materials was roughly known, the fine details had to be learned by the concoctions master themselves. The reason why she failed in the smelting step was that she didn't have a sense of the medicinal pill's composition, so she couldn't grasp the quantity. She changed the materials and failed again, but a smile appeared on Emotinga's face. This time, when her divine sense entered the pill furnace, she could already sense the subtle sensations of the materials, so she washed the furnace again and continued to concoct pills. After quickly adding the materials, she used her divine sense to explore the furnace. She felt the materials inside were melting and fusing with each other. After a quarter of an hour, they finally turned into a complete medicinal liquid, and she could smell the rich fragrance of medicinal pills. After swallowing several restorative panaceas, Emotinga guided her spiritual aura into her dantian. An even fiercer dantian fire came out and covered the entire pill furnace. Under the high temperature, the medicinal liquid in the pill furnace began to boil and shrink little by little. Emotinga kept swallowing restorative panaceas to maintain the dantian fire. Now was the time to condense pills, so she needed to maintain a stable, high-temperature fire. However, the spiritual aura of aura refining cultivators was too weak, so she could only rely on restorative panaceas to maintain the dantian fire. She didn't know how much time had passed or how many restorative panaceas she ate, but finally, the medicinal liquid in the pill furnace slowly shrunk into lumps, which then began to condense into pills. When the pills condensed, Emotinga happily stopped the dantian fire and opened the pill furnace. But in the next moment, her expression became extremely gloomy. The medicinal pill had already taken shape, but it exploded the moment she opened the furnace. She knew it was because she opened the furnace at the wrong time. Sure enough, concocting pills wasn't a simple matter. No wonder the book emphasized that only after opening the furnace dozens of times could one grasp the entire process of concocting medicinal pills. Otherwise, wouldn't it be a huge profit if she could make 1 or 2 spirit stones for each of the 7 or 8 kinds of medicinal pills with only 1 or 2 spirit stones for each of the medicinal pills she refined? Because the success rate was too low, being able to concoct 200 or 300 medicinal pills out of 700 or 800 materials was already considered very good. Coupled with other investments, the profit was really not much. Shaking her head, Emotinga once again dumped the medicinal dregs, cleaned the pill furnace and continued to concoct medicinal pills. Even if she didn't have talent, she would definitely succeed as long as she kept working hard. In any case, she had a lot of spirit stones now. When she ran out of spirit stones, she could consider giving up. Chapter 82. Several days later, Emotinga finished her pill concocting. Of course, she hadn't used up all of the 700 or 800 portions of medicinal pill materials. After hundreds of pill concocting experiments, she was able to grasp the whole process and made about 5 or 6 finished pills. Although the success rate of only 5% was low, considering she was a beginner, it was normal. Even if she was a great concocting master, her success rate was only 50 to 60%. Ordinary concoctions masters could only achieve a success rate of 30%. However, this result still made her depressed. No wonder Yi clan members weren't proficient in pill concocting. If this result was placed in a cultivation group, she would definitely be classified as someone without any talent. Since she knew her talent wasn't good, Emotinga didn't set a high goal. She only wanted to reach the level of 20 to 30% of ordinary concoctions masters. With her current basic understanding of pill concocting, she could probably reach a success rate of 30% after using up the 700 or 800 portions of materials. Then, she could learn more difficult pill recipes. According to the pill recipe, this constitution-enhancing pill was a kind of medicinal pill that was quite difficult to concoct. The hand seals were complicated, and the control of the Dantian real fire was also very subtle. It wasn't something that could be completed in a short time. After carefully calculating the cost, Mo Tiange realized she was still too optimistic. This time, she only concocted the most common medicinal pills. She spent nearly 200 spirit stones just to familiarize herself with pill concocting. If she concocted more difficult pills, the remaining 3,000 spirit stones wouldn't be enough to buy the materials. Moreover, with her current success rate, selling the medicinal pills to buy materials for her to continue concocting pills was just a dream. In addition, the materials for the constitution-enhancing pill itself weren't cheap. The two 500-year-old purple Ganoderma and black fern probably cost more than 1,000 spirit stones. Even if she was lucky enough to use more than 3,000 spirit stones to practice pill concocting to the stage where she could concoct constitution-enhancing pills, she still wouldn't be able to afford the materials. After having a headache for a while, Mo Tiange suddenly realized something and couldn't help but laugh at herself for worrying too much. She had just started learning pill concocting. She didn't know how many years it would be before she could concoct constitution-enhancing pills. In any case, she didn't need to cultivate as hard as before. She could earn enough money in a few years. Besides, even if she obtained constitution-enhancing pills, she wasn't sure she could successfully build her foundation in one try. If she failed, she would have to compete for foundation-building pills 10 years later. If she failed, she would have to wait another 10 years. She was only 20 years old now, so she had more than 100 years to live. What was there to be afraid of? With this thought in mind, Mo Tiange managed to extricate herself from the endless pill concocting. There was less than half a month before the Immortals' assembly of the Tiandao sect. There were more and more people at the foot of the mountain. Luckily, she had rented a house a few days ago. Otherwise, she would have to sleep outside. Mo Tiange strolled along the street, watching the crowds of cultivators coming and going. Now that she had reached the peak stage of the aura refining realm, she had hopes of entering the foundation building realm, and she also had a lot of money. Everything was going according to her wishes. The only exception was second uncle's imminent death, but this was something she had absolutely no ability to change. The lifespan of a cultivator was related to their cultivation and maintenance. The most important factor was one's cultivation level. The higher one's cultivation level was, the longer one's lifespan would be. Advancing to the next realm would increase one's lifespan by at least 100 years. For example, the lifespan of an aura refining cultivator was between 100 to 200 years old. Cultivators below the fourth layer of the aura refining realm could only live up to what mortals call 100 years old. However, once they broke through to the fourth layer of the aura refining realm, they could live up to 150 years old. If their cultivation level was extremely profound and reached the peak of the aura refining realm, they could basically live up to 200 years old. However, if they advanced from the aura refining realm to the foundation building realm, they could live for at least 100 years. Second uncle was originally in the middle stage of the foundation building realm. If he took good care of himself, he could live for at least another 50 years. However, the injuries he suffered a few years ago were too severe. Now, second uncle was only about 300 years old, but his lifespan was already about to run out. Since he had no hope of advancing to the next realm, if she wanted second uncle to live, she had to take longevity pills. Each pill could increase his lifespan by 100 years. However, longevity pills hadn't appeared for several hundred years. Even if they did appear, countless nascent soul cultivators would fight for them. How could they have a chance? Mo Tiange smiled dejectedly, then followed the stream of people and walked up the mountain. They were just small cultivators. How could they have a share of those peerless spiritual pills? They could only accept this fate. Tiandao Sect's monastery was indeed worthy of its title as the #1 cultivation group in Kunwu. The entire monastery was carved from a huge piece of spirit jade. When the sunlight shone down, it reflected a 7-colored radiance. The light was flowing and overflowing, dazzling. There were also clouds floating and moving around the monastery, giving people a feeling that they were in a fairyland. Mo Tiange couldn't help but sigh. It was no wonder Tiandao Sect's symbol was an immortal gate and auspicious clouds. As long as you saw their monastery, it would be very difficult for you not to remember this scene. Since she wasn't a disciple of Tiandao Sect and the Immortals' assembly hadn't started yet, she naturally couldn't enter the monastery. Like all the other tourists, Mo Tiange took a turn then went back down the mountain. She didn't envy Tiandao Sect at all. Even if Yunwu Sect was much worse than Tiandao Sect, a cultivation group was still the same thing. It was just that Tiandao Sect's treatment was slightly better. Of course, she didn't ignore cultivation groups. Although she had long planned to leave Yunwu Sect, her ultimate goal was only to get rid of all this trouble. When the time came, she would still have to find a cultivation group to settle down in. For no other reason than to enjoy the shade of a big tree and avoid a lot of trouble. After returning to the town at the foot of the mountain, Mo Tiange remembered that she no longer had any restorative panaceas, so she casually entered 100 Herbs Hall. Inside 100 Herbs Hall, the front of the counter was still crowded with people. Mo Tiange looked at the layers of people and didn't want to be squeezed with them. She also thought that restorative panaceas weren't anything good, so it would be the same to buy them elsewhere. Thus, she prepared to leave. Just as she was about to turn around, she caught a glimpse of the old man who sold her materials and pill recipes that day. He was still sitting in the corner, waving at her. "And he's calling me, right?" Seeing that she stopped, the old man waved his hand even more vigorously. Mo Tiange approached him with doubt. "Are you calling me?" The old man smiled and cupped his hands towards her. "Of course. What did fellow Daoist come to buy today?" Mo Tiange said, "I just wanted to buy some restorative panaceas." "Oh." The old man looked at her carefully again. "Could it be that you also came to participate in the Immortals' assembly?" Mo Tiange didn't deny it and asked, "Fellow Daoist, is there something you need?" The old man smiled and said, "It's nothing. It's just that we also met once, so I wanted to greet you since we suddenly met. By the way, if fellow Daoist needs anything else, why don't you tell me? Maybe I can help you." Mo Tiange glanced at him vigilantly. She just came to buy restorative panaceas, which shouldn't be eye-catching at all. Why did this person seem to want to build a relationship with her? The old man was also a shrewd person. Upon seeing her expression, he waved his hand and said, "Fellow Daoist, please don't misunderstand. I just have some news that might be useful to you." "News?" Mo Tiange stared at him in confusion. The old man took out a piece of animal skin from somewhere and handed it to her. He said meaningfully, "Fellow Daoist might be interested." Mo Tiange took the animal skin and saw a line of words written on it, "Hu Clan Store's sales list." She looked up at the old man in front of her, waiting for his explanation. The old man moved closer to her and said, "Hu Clan is the largest cultivation clan in Tiandao Sect. In this town at the foot of the mountain, aside from the several shops belonging to the school, Hu Clan is the most powerful. This sales list is used to deal with the inventory of some top-quality goods." Mo Tiange was confused. Since they're top-quality goods, how did they become inventory? The old man said with a smile, "Fellow Daoist might not know, but there are too many kinds of spiritual plants and objects in this world. Some things are very rare and of top quality, but they might not be wanted for a long time. If a big shop has been open for a long time, it'll accumulate a lot of these top quality goods. If it wants to sell them, it's not good to directly put them on the counter. Even if it wants to put them on the counter, I'm afraid the counter won't be able to accommodate them. If it doesn't sell, it'll cost the shop a lot of its assets. Therefore, some big shops will clear their inventory every 30 to 50 years and hold a sales list. At that time, all the goods for sale will be displayed for people to choose from. However, the ground will be full of top-quality goods, so those who can attend the sales list aren't ordinary cultivators. They're all carefully selected and reliable people. His last sentence surprised Mo Tiange. That being the case, why did fellow Taoist tell me? The old man glanced at her and smiled cunningly. Because I saw that fellow Taoist is quite wealthy, you're very steady, and your cultivation level is also passable. Presumably, you're qualified for this sales list. Oh. Mo Tiange raised her eyebrows. Who are you, fellow Taoist? You can actually decide who qualifies for the sales list. The old man narrowed his eyes and smiled, looking quite pleased with himself. Although I'm not a high-level cultivator, I'm a member of Hu Clan. Every cultivator in Hu Clan is qualified to recommend 1 or 2 people to attend the sales list. I see. It was no wonder this old man's cultivation level was so low, but his work was good. It turned out he had a backer. Seeing that she didn't answer, the old man blinked his mung bean eyes. Fellow Taoist, don't you want to go? It's very likely you'll find some cheap goods there. Mo Tiange, who was still flipping through the animal skin paper, stared at the old man unhurriedly. Fellow Taoist, are there any benefits for recommending people? The old man was stunned. Soon after, he stroked his beard and revealed a somewhat treacherous smile. Correct. If a customer buys something, the recommender can get a 100th commission. Although it's not much, it's still a reward for your hard work. With a glance, Mo Tiange knew the old man wasn't telling the truth. The benefits were definitely more than what he said. However, she didn't feel like revealing such a trivial matter and continued to slowly flip through the sales list. Seeing her like this, the old man was a bit anxious. He couldn't help but ask, fellow Taoist, do you want to go? Mo Tiange looked through all the goods for sale, then said with a smile, I'm just going to see the world. It doesn't matter if I don't buy anything, right? Upon hearing what she said, the old man relaxed and nodded with a smile. You only need to pay the entrance fee of 2 spirit stones. 2 spirit stones. The old man revealed a somewhat cunning smile. Fellow Taoist, don't say that you can't afford it. This old man has a good eye for people. Although fellow Taoist doesn't look very rich, you should have a certain amount of wealth. Besides, there are so many top-quality goods. Even if you just want to watch the fun, 2 spirit stones isn't expensive. This old man mingled in the marketplace, so his eyes were indeed sharp. Mo Tiange smiled and nodded. All right, thank you. May I know when the sales list will be held? What's the story? Upon hearing her question, the old man took out a wooden identity tablet and handed it to her. Mo Tiange took it and looked at it. The material was ordinary. One side was engraved with the character, Hu, and the other side was engraved with the number 1, 2, 5. The old man said, this number is your number. You might get a gift at that time. In addition, you have to have this identity tablet to buy things, so you can't lose it. When the sales list is over, Hu Clan will naturally take it back. Mo Tiange nodded. The old man continued to say, the sales list will be held at 7 p.m. tomorrow night. At that time, fellow Taoist can go to the back door of Breeze Pavilion, which isn't far from here. There'll naturally be someone there to meet you. As for the form of the sale, you're free to choose. First come, first served. Fellow Taoist doesn't need to be afraid of conflict with others. Mo Tiange was very satisfied. She raised the animal skin paper in her hand and said, "I'll keep this. Is that okay?" The old man smiled from ear to ear. "Of course. Since fellow Taoist wants to go, I'll naturally give it to you. However, please don't tell others about it." "Of course. Then I'll take my leave first." The old man made a "please" gesture and said, "Please help yourself." Mo Tiange cupped her hands and left the shop. On the way, she lifted the paper in her hand and smiled. Among the goods on the list, there happened to be an item with the words "several hundred years old purple Ganoderma" written on it. Chapter 83. Young Master, please come inside. Mo Tiange followed a female cultivator in the first layer of the aura refining realm. They passed through layers of curtains, bypassed one passageway after another, and finally arrived at a hall. This hall was naturally much smaller than the hall of the Market Square Dao conference a few days ago, but it was gorgeous and extravagant. It was really amazing. The floor was paved with jade bricks, the walls were painted with gold powder, tables and chairs made of 100-year-old spiritual wood were placed in the hall, and even the teapot on the table was made of extraordinary jade. There were also gems inlaid everywhere. Even though secular jewelry wasn't worth mentioning to cultivators, it definitely cost a lot to decorate such a hall. Moreover, most of them carried spiritual aura, so they obviously weren't ordinary objects. This Hu clan was indeed worthy of being the #1 clan in the #1 sect. It was so rich and overbearing. Mo Tiange stood at the entrance, dazzled by these furnishings. They were really too gorgeous. "Young master, please record your identity tablet." A voice came from beside her. Mo Tiange turned around and saw a low-level female cultivator standing respectfully on the side. She realized she had lost her composure. Fortunately, this female cultivator didn't show any mocking expression, as if this was a common occurrence. Most cultivators didn't like jewelry, so such a gorgeous scene was very rare. Mo Tiange handed over her identity tablet. The female cultivator took it, wrote down her number, then returned it to her and said with a smile, "Young master, please help yourself. If you like anything, just bring it to the back and pay for it. If you don't understand, you can also ask a maid to introduce you." Mo Tiange frowned slightly but didn't say anything. She just nodded and walked into the hall. She noticed that this female cultivator was the same as the female cultivator who led her in. She didn't call her fellow Taoist, but young master, and her attitude was very respectful. Obviously, she was a maid, not a cultivator. When she entered the hall, she saw many beautiful female cultivators waiting in the corner, waiting for the guests' orders. They should be the maids mentioned by the female cultivator who recorded the identity tablet. This Hu clan was really generous. There were at least 50 or 60 of these female cultivators, and their cultivation levels ranged from the first layer to the 5th layer. All of them were beautiful, polite, gentle, and submissive. They were actually using their beauty to please the guests. Mo Tiange felt very uncomfortable when she saw some guests strolling around with so-called maids, teasing them. Especially when she thought about how the #1 clan of the #1 sect actually used such methods to entertain guests, it caused her to instantly lose a good impression of the Hu clan. However, it didn't matter whether she had a good impression of him or not. She was here to buy things, not to make friends. Once she got what she wanted, it didn't matter. Looking around, although this underground hall couldn't be compared to the main hall of the market, it wasn't small either. Currently, the hall was filled with over 100 tables, but it still gave off a feeling of spaciousness. These tables were densely packed with all kinds of objects. Most of them were materials, but there were very few spirit tools and elixirs. This was normal, as there was never a lack of people wanting spirit tools and pills. Only materials that were hard to identify or had relatively few uses would become a backlog of goods. It was likely that the spirit tools and pills displayed here were just for show by the Hu clan. At this time, there weren't many guests. Most of them were cultivators in the 8th layer of the aura refining realm or above. A small portion of them were foundation building cultivators. There weren't any core formation cultivators. Thinking about it, it made sense. Although this market was selling so-called top-grade items, what cultivators in the core formation realm or above wanted were all natural treasures. How could ordinary top-grade items satisfy them? These cultivators surrounded the tables filled with objects and gossiped about them. Mo Tiange glanced at them, but her line of sight was blocked, so she walked to the wall and asked the female cultivator standing there, "Excuse me, may I ask where the spiritual plants are?" Upon hearing her question, the maid respectfully bowed, then raised her head and said, "I'll take young master there." "No need." Mo Tiange immediately refused. Being served like a young master by a female cultivator was something she couldn't accept. But as soon as she spoke, she realized her tone was stiff, so she added, "I just want to stroll around slowly. I'll go by myself." The female cultivator didn't say anything. She just pointed at something and said in a soft voice, "It's over there." Following the direction, Mo Tiange saw the target. She nodded and said, "Thank you." The female cultivator bowed again. "Please help yourself. If you need anything, please call us." Although her attitude was good, Mo Tiange felt more and more uncomfortable. She already knew that female cultivators generally had low cultivation levels, so their status wasn't high. However, she still couldn't accept that female cultivators were obviously using their looks to serve people. But how could she say anything about other people's behavior? What the eye doesn't see, the heart doesn't grieve over. There were a lot of customers at the spiritual plants tables. Mo Tiange was a bit anxious, so she walked directly towards the spiritual plants. She secretly prayed that the purple Ganoderma hadn't been bought yet. In addition, the purple Ganoderma had to be more than 500 years old. Otherwise, she'd rejoice in vain. Spiritual plants were naturally one of the most popular items. Right now, most people were walking around the tables with spiritual plants. As soon as Mo Tiange approached, she saw 5 or 6 people surrounding a table. One of them commented, "Although this 1,000-year-old ginseng is used as medicine in the secular world, its advantage is that it's old. Once it's over 1,000 years old, even an ordinary herb will become a spiritual plant. Besides, since ancient times, ginseng has cultivated into a human. Once it's over 1,000 years old, it's completely comparable to spiritual plants." Another person said, "This star leaf grass isn't bad, but it's a kind of spiritual plant that's hard to find. Some specific pill recipes require it, so although it's not old, it's worth buying. There's also this neither flower nor leaf grass. Everyone knows it's a good thing. Although 100 years isn't long, it's not easy to obtain. However, this kind of spiritual plant is only used for look-preserving pills, so it's not very useful." Mo Tiange pretended to be interested. She leaned closer to listen for a while and found a gap to glance at the table. She didn't see the purple Ganoderma, so she went to the next table. She repeated this process until she finally saw her target at the 7th table. This purple Ganoderma looked like a lump of dark purple stone. It was about the size of a palm and had thick leaves. It was lying quietly in the box. Mo Tiange looked at the description on the box. Purple Ganoderma, 600 years old. Finished product. 500 spirit stones. She then leaned closer and sniffed it. It had a strong and slightly sweet smell, which matched what was written in the book. Seeing that no one was paying attention to her, Mo Tiange calmed herself down. She picked up the box unhurriedly and went to another table. She pretended to browse and chose a 300-year-old stalk of solitary steppe grass. Then, she went to the innermost counter. Finally, the person standing behind this counter wasn't a female cultivator, but an old man with a grizzled beard. He wore a neat blue gown and looked very steady. Mo Tienge handed over the 2 jade boxes in her hands. The cultivator took them and opened them. He looked at her with surprise and said, "A 600-year-old purple Ganoderma and a 300-year-old lone steppe grass. The total is 700 spirit stones." Mo Tienge didn't hesitate. She paid the spirit stones, then took the 2 jade boxes and stuffed them into her chinkuan bag. The reason why she paid so readily was because everyone here was relatively rich. 700 spirit stones for a 600-year-old purple Ganoderma and a 300-year-old lone steppe grass was already considered cheap. If she didn't do it readily, people would suspect that she came to this sale fair. Besides, Hu clan was the #1 clan and the #1 cultivation group. 700 spirit stones was only a small business. If she bought 1 or 2 items, other people might not remember. At this moment, Mo Tienge breathed a sigh of relief when the purple Ganoderma was safely stuffed into her chinkuan bag. She was finally in the mood to stroll around this sale fair. Although she had news about the purple Ganoderma yesterday, she didn't expect things to go so smoothly. She imagined many possible situations she might encounter, but she didn't encounter any of them. She was really too lucky. Without any ulterior motives, Mo Tienge discovered that there were indeed a lot of good things in this sale fair. Many materials she had only seen in books were placed on the tables one by one, making her want to buy them. However, after thinking about it for a while, she felt it was unnecessary to buy them. What was the point of buying things with special purposes if they weren't used to concoct special medicinal pills or spirit tools? If they weren't useful, no matter how good they would still be wasted. However, there were occasionally some lucky people who suddenly saw the materials they wanted to buy. They would go wild with joy, pick them up and rush over to pay the spirit stones. As time passed, the number of people gradually increased. Although the hall was large, it seemed crowded because it was full of tables. Mo Tienge once again chose several materials that might be useful and a large bottle of restorative panaceas. After she finished paying, she wanted to find a quiet place. But when she did, she was startled. Jiang Qingxian. Not far from her, Jiang Qingxian and 2 other youths wearing Tiandao sect's disciple robes were walking together. They were accompanied by several female cultivators. The 3 of them chatted and laughed as they walked, seeming to be very happy. Mo Tienge quickly walked around a table to avoid them, feeling extremely baffled. Has this Jiang Qingxian been going the same way as me? He looks very familiar with these 2 Tiandao sect disciples. Could it be that he's visiting friends? That's unlikely. It would be strange if this young master would travel for more than 20 days just to visit friends. But if he's not visiting friends, why does he seem to be very happy with these 2 people and even come to the sale fair together? Mo Tienge shook her head, unable to figure it out. However, this Jiang Qingxian really isn't a good person. The disciple who traveled with him just died a few days ago, but he actually went to have fun with other friends as if nothing had happened. Of course, she knew it wasn't appropriate to let Jiang Qingxian know about her whereabouts, lest he saw a familiar face and became suspicious. Although young Master Jiang certainly wouldn't notice a small disciple like her, they were from the same sect after all. They often met, so it was normal for him to recognize someone familiar. Thus, Mo Tienge lowered her head and slowly walked through the crowd to the door. Just as she was about to step out, someone stopped her. "Young master, I'm sorry. You can only go out after the sale fair is over." Mo Tienge was dumbfounded. There's such a rule. The female cultivator guarding the door nodded. Yes. Please wait for another 2 hours before you leave. At that time, 2 hours. Mo Tiange really didn't dare to take the risk. However, this was Hu clan's territory, so she definitely couldn't make the decisions herself. The female cultivator observed Mo Tiange's expression and saw she was unwilling, so she said with a smile, "Young master, even if I let you go out, there are foundation-building cultivators from my clan guarding the door, so, if there were, she wouldn't even need to think about going out." Mo Tiange sighed. What if I don't want to see anymore? The female cultivator still smiled and said, "Then please wait a moment." As she spoke, she waved her hand. Another beautiful female cultivator came over and bowed. The female cultivator guarding the door said, "Take this young master to rest." The female cultivator accepted the order and faced Mo Tiange. "Young master, please come with me." Chapter 84. The female cultivator led Mo Tiange to the corner of the hall, then pushed open a completely inconspicuous wooden door. "Young master, please." Mo Tiange looked around. Compared to the hall, this was a very simple room. There wasn't a single person inside, so she nodded. "Thank you." The female cultivator's attitude was still very respectful. She bowed then retreated. When the door closed and she was the only one left in the room, Mo Tiange heaved a sigh of relief. She found a recliner and sat down, wiping her face tiredly. In fact, letting Jiang Qingxian see her wasn't a big deal. From beginning to end, Jiang Qingxian didn't know she saw him snatching the medicinal pills. It was just that she felt guilty and didn't want him to see her, so she didn't want to cause more trouble. She reached into her Qianquan bag and felt around. The things were still there, so she closed her eyes and sat in meditation to regulate her breathing. 2 hours passed quickly. When she opened her eyes, the female cultivator who brought her here had already opened the door and said respectfully, "Young master, the sales fair is over. You can leave now." Mo Tiange answered, "I know. I'll wait until the crowd disperses a little before I go out." This reason was very normal, so the female cultivator answered, "Yes, please do as you wish." After waiting for about a quarter of an hour, Mo Tiange guessed there probably wasn't anyone left, so she left the room. Sure enough, the only people left in the hall were those female cultivators who were packing up under the direction of several stewards. She glanced around but didn't see Jiang Qingxian, so she swaggered out of Hu clan's cool breeze pavilion and quietly returned to the small room she rented. Today's matter made her realize the importance of illusory techniques. If it weren't for the fact that her illusory techniques were too weak, she wouldn't have had to hide. However, thinking about today's harvest, Mo Tiange still couldn't hide her excitement. Purple Ganoderma wasn't easy to find, but green ferns were common. When she returned, she just needed to ask the sect to buy them. She should be able to get them very soon. After lying down for a while in a good mood, Mo Tiange suddenly felt a sharp pain in her heart. She frowned and thought for a moment, but her face suddenly turned pale with fright. She took out second uncle's natal spirit tablet, which she kept close to her body. Sure enough, the dark red color of the jade tablet faded a little and turned into a pink color. "Second uncle, it's second uncle." With a pale face, Mo Tiange jumped up and put her things away. Without stopping, she opened the door and rushed out of the town. The natal spirit tablet's change in color meant that second uncle's injuries were acting up. Second uncle was indeed comforting her. His situation was clearly not good, but he wanted her to come out and travel. In the end, not even 2 months had passed, and even if she rushed back now, it would take at least 10 days. She did not know if second uncle could hold on. Burning with anxiety, Mo Tiange rushed towards Mount Yunwu with all her might. She didn't stop to rest at all. Even when she ran out of spiritual aura, she didn't stop. Instead, she ate restorative panaceas. From time to time, he would pay attention to the natal spirit tablet. Fortunately, it did not fade again. 10 days later, Emotienga ran into second uncle's small courtyard. Second uncle. There was no sound in the room. Emotienga rushed forward, but her face immediately turned deathly pale. Second uncle lay on the bed, motionless. She hurried over and felt his pulse. He was still breathing, but his spiritual energy seemed to be very chaotic. She let out a sigh of relief and fed the small revitalizing pill to second uncle. She didn't know how long she had been waiting anxiously. Perhaps it was only a short while, or perhaps it was a very long time. Finally, she heard second uncle's weak voice. Second uncle. She shouted. Yi Jiang opened his eyes and forced a smile. With great difficulty, he managed to squeeze out 2 words. Medicinal pills. Emotienga hastily took out all the small revitalizing pills from her chinkuan bag. Second uncle, is this it? Yi Jiang nodded. After she fed him all the pills, he sat up and adjusted his breathing with her help. This time, however, it took him a whole day. Day after day, day after day. Finally, second uncle's complexion slowly improved and he opened his eyes. Seeing that second uncle was no longer in danger, Emotienga's nerves, which had been tense for the whole day, slightly relaxed. However, she was still a bit nervous. Second uncle, what happened to you? Yi Jiang shook his head. I'm fine. Seeing that his complexion was still ashen, Emotienga was a bit anxious. You're already like this and you're still fine. Second uncle, tell me honestly, what happened in the end? Yi Jiang smiled at her to appease her. I'm really fine. Second uncle forgot and finished all the small revitalizing pills. As a result, my injuries relapsed. I didn't have any medicine with me, so I couldn't hold on and had an accident. After he finished speaking, he looked at her with concern. Xiao Tian, did you rush back because of me? It's all second uncle's fault for being careless and implicating you. Emotienga hastily shook her head. It's okay. I found something outside that'll be very helpful to me in building my foundation, so I was just about to come back. Second uncle, are you really okay? I said I'm fine, so I'm fine. Don't worry about me. What did you find? Emotienga carefully examined second uncle. Although his breathing was weak, it was much more stable than before, so she reluctantly believed him. She then took out the pill recipe for constitution-enhancing pills and said with a smile, Second uncle, look. Yi Jiang took the pill recipe with a skeptical look on his face. After he probed it with his divine sense, his expression suddenly became solemn. After a long time, he finally exhaled and said, so it's constitution-enhancing pills. Where did you get them? Emotienga was surprised. Second uncle, you know about them. A nostalgic expression appeared on Yi Jiang's face. 200 years ago, this constitution-enhancing pill set off a reign of terror. There's no cultivator over 200 years old who doesn't know about them. A reign of terror. Yi Jiang slowly nodded. He seemed to be recalling something. At that time, second uncle was still an aura-refining cultivator, your father was still in the middle stage of the foundation-building realm, and there was also a core formation ancestor in our family who hadn't passed away yet. This constitution-enhancing pill appeared in an ancient place, but it set off a storm that affected most nascent soul and core formation cultivators in the celestial pole. At first, it was discovered by core formation cultivators, so they fought over it incessantly. Later on, many nascent soul cultivators also fought over it. Our core formation ancestor was injured and died early because of this. But in the end, the pill recipe was lost. We don't know who got it. Where did you get it? Mo Tiange said, it was an individual aura refining cultivator. I also happened to meet him by accident. She then recounted what happened that night. After she finished, Yi Jiang remained silent for a long time. He thought for a long time but still couldn't figure it out. He finally said, maybe this person is just lucky. This is also a kind of fated chance. After he finished speaking, he looked at Mo Tiange and said with a smile, Little Tian, this thing's value is hard to estimate. It seems the heavens are helping you. Mo Tiange was also very happy to see second uncle so happy. Also, I happened to buy a 600-year-old purple Ganoderma at the auction. I'm really lucky. Oh. That's rare. 600-year-old purple Ganoderma is very rare. Yes, if it wasn't a coincidence, I don't know how long it would have taken me to buy it. Right, second uncle, I've been thinking about it, and I think it's better for me to learn how to concoct pills by myself. What do you think? Yi Jiang nodded slightly. Of course. He then praised her, you're becoming more and more steady in your actions. Second uncle is relieved. But it seems I really don't have any talent in concocting pills. I've refined more than 100 sets of materials for low-level medicinal pills, but only 6 pills were successfully concocted. Yi Jiang couldn't help but laugh. This is normal. You don't have to look down on yourself. Most concoctions masters are like this at the beginning. Talented people are always in the minority, but only those who persevere are masters. Take your time. You're still young, you have more than 100 years to squander. I understand, second uncle. After hesitating for a moment, Mo Tiange asked again, second uncle, your injuries. Seeing that he couldn't hide it from her, Yi Jiang finally sighed and said, all right, second uncle will tell you the truth. My condition is indeed not good. Before you came back, second uncle was unconscious for too long, so my injuries were even more serious. Since you've come back, you should accompany second uncle in these last moments. Chapter 85. While making tea, Mo Tiange leaned against the table in a daze. When she came back that day, the meaning of second uncle's words was already very clear. These days, she was absent-minded and kept thinking about this matter. That day, second uncle had said that she still had 100 years to squander. Second uncle, who had always been forcing her to cultivate, had actually said those words to her. It was clear to see how bad the situation was. Second uncle had basically treated her as a dead person. Now, she no longer asked herself what she would do if second uncle died. Seeing second uncle's calm expression, she made up her mind to let second uncle, who had been worrying about her for 10 years, leave in peace. But, thinking about this result still made her sad. The tea leaves in the pot unfolded, and the tea gradually turned light green. Mo Tiange calmed herself down, poured a cup of tea, and handed it to second uncle. Second uncle, drink some tea. She added some mind-calming spiritual herbs to the tea, hoping second uncle would feel better after drinking it. Yi Jiang was even older now. In fact, even if a cultivator's lifespan was nearing its end, they would still be able to maintain their youthful appearance. They would not wither like mortals. The reason why he was like this was because he was injured. After drinking the tea, he seemed to be a little more spirited and asked, Xiao Tian, last time, you said the spiritual aura in your body changed. Mo Tiange nodded. Yes, it became very strange. A trace of very cold spiritual aura gradually appeared in my dantian, and it also swallowed other spiritual auras and transformed them into this kind of spiritual aura. I didn't know the reason, so I didn't dare to continue cultivating. Yi Jiang thought for a while then said slowly, it doesn't matter. You should continue cultivating. Second uncle once heard that when female cultivators practiced certain cultivation techniques, their spiritual aura would change. Presumably, it was because the cultivation technique leaned toward yin. Your situation should be because of the special nature of the cultivation technique you practice. In the past, your cultivation level wasn't high enough, so you couldn't transform it into pure yin spiritual aura. Now that you've reached the peak stage of the aura refining realm and your cultivation level is gradually increasing, the spiritual aura in your body changed. This change must be the preparation your dantian made for building your foundation. Since that's the case, you should continue cultivating and wait until your spiritual aura completely changes before building your foundation. This answer made Mo Tiange happy. Does that mean I'll have a better chance of building my foundation? Yi Jiang nodded. That should be the case. He thought for a while then said, otherwise, you should go back to the sect. Of course, don't ask anyone, just go to the sect's ancient records collection to check. Okay, got it. How about, you go now? Second uncle isn't feeling unwell right now. Go, or else you won't be able to get away. Mo Tiange understood the meaning behind his words. Second uncle was worried that her injuries would worsen, so he didn't dare to refuse. She said, all right. Second uncle, be careful. Half an hour later, Mo Tiange returned to Yunwi's sect. First, he went to the steward's hall to inform them that he had returned. Then, he returned to his residence. Everything was the same as before she left. Jiang Shanghang was cultivating in his room, while Qin Shi and Lu Yidao were still in closed-door meditation, and Lu Yidao had reportedly entered his closed-door meditation Immortal's cave. Oh, there's one more thing. Senior Martial Brother Zhou has succeeded in building his foundation and has become Martial Uncle Zhou. Mo Tiange was very happy for him upon hearing this news. Although Martial Uncle Zhou was cold at the beginning, he was actually a good person. If the disciples living in this courtyard had any questions, he would answer them with all his heart. Moreover, it was thanks to Martial Uncle Zhou's care that she could live so comfortably here. During the 2 years she was in closed-door meditation, she didn't do anything, and it was Martial Uncle Zhou who deliberately put in a good word for her in the steward's hall. Because of this, Mo Tiange pondered whether she should congratulate Martial Uncle Zhou or not. In the end, she decided to ask someone to deliver a message and prepare to go after the matter was settled. After all, Martial Uncle Zhou lived in the North Peak now, so it wasn't convenient for her to go there. Just as she was about to go to 10,000 Laws Pavilion, a voice came from outside. Junior Martial Brother Yi, is Junior Martial Brother Yi Xiaotianing? Mo Tiange opened the door to her room and saw a male disciple she didn't know standing outside the small hall. Senior Martial Brother, what's the matter? Upon seeing her, the man smiled and said, you're Junior Martial Brother Yi. Mo Tiange nodded. Yes. The man sized her up from head to toe. His gaze made her feel very uncomfortable. Then, he said, it was Martial Uncle Zhou who told me to come. He heard you came back, so he wanted to see you. Oh. Mo Tiange said, I just asked this senior Martial Brother from the North Peak to deliver a message, and he arrived already. The man was stunned. I don't know. It's just that. Martial Uncle Zhou told me to deliver a message. I see. Thank you, Senior Martial Brother. I'll go now. The man said, I'll take you there. Presumably, you also don't know where Martial Uncle Zhou is. This man was really kind, so Mo Tiange said, thank you, Senior Martial Brother. You're welcome. Let's go. After leaving her room, Mo Tiange asked, may I know Senior Martial Brother's surname? The man left in a hurry and answered without looking back, my surname is Wu. Oh, so it's Senior Martial Brother Wu. Senior Martial Brother, are you an elite disciple of the North Peak? This question made Senior Marshal Brother Wu proud for a moment. His footsteps also slowed down a bit. Yes, my master's name is Qingyu. You should know him. Ah, so you're Marshal Uncle Qingyu's brilliant disciple. It's an honor to meet you. Mo Tiange politely greeted him. This Senior Marshal Brother Wu immediately raised his chin proudly, causing her to snicker. In fact, the reason she said it was an honor to meet him was because since this Senior Marshal Brother Wu was a foundation-building martial uncle's disciple, he should be an elite disciple with a profound cultivation level. However, he looked like he was in his 30s, yet his cultivation level was only in the 7th layer of the aura refining realm. Nevertheless, it wasn't strange. This Senior Marshal Brother Wu only had a cultivation level in the 7th layer, but he still called her Junior Marshal Brother. Obviously, he had something to rely on. Of course, she wouldn't say this out loud. Judging from this Senior Marshal Brother Wu's reaction just now, he was someone who cared a lot about his reputation. If she said something to him and it reached his ears, he would definitely turn hostile immediately. After walking for a while, Mo Tiange asked curiously, Senior Marshal Brother Wu, which road is this? Does it lead to Tongbei Peak? This Senior Marshal Brother Wu walked very fast without looking back. Marshal Uncle Zhou just came to the South Peak to take care of business. Quickly follow me. Mo Tiange frowned and followed him for a while. Seeing that the road was becoming more and more desolate, she immediately stopped and said, Senior Marshal Brother Wu. Senior Marshal Brother Wu didn't answer her. After walking a few steps and realizing that she wasn't following him, he finally turned his head and said unhappily, What are you doing? Mo Tiange swept her gaze over her surroundings and stared at him vigilantly. Where in the world does Senior Marshal Brother Wu want to take me? Upon hearing her question, Senior Marshal Brother Wu's eyes suddenly flickered. He stammered, and nothing, judging from his expression, it would be strange if Mo Tiange believed him. She immediately took out her spirit tool to be on guard and said coldly, Senior Marshal Brother Wu, do you think I'm a fool? If we go down this road, we'll reach a cliff at the end. Do you think Marshal Uncle Zhou will meet me at the cliff? Seeing that his purpose was seen through, this person cast a glance to the side, then clenched his teeth and said loudly, Junior Marshal Brother, it's too late to leave now. Mo Tiange smiled contemptuously. Senior Marshal Brother Wu, do you think you can stop me? This person obviously didn't expect that she would turn hostile and actually not take him seriously at all. He immediately stammered, Junior Marshal Brother Yi, we can talk about this. Mo Tiange was surprised to see his reaction. This person was an elite disciple, so how could he be so spineless? But she clearly knew there was a problem, so how could she continue following him? Besides, this person was an elite disciple after all, so it wouldn't be good for her to attack him. She immediately turned around and walked away without saying anything. Junior Marshal Brother Yi. She didn't even respond. Soon after, she felt a spiritual aura fluctuation behind her. Mo Tiange reacted very quickly and dodged, but she immediately broke out in a cold sweat. What was attacking her was actually a high-level, blue sea freezing ice talisman. If she was hit just now, she would probably be frozen on the spot and be trampled on. What does this Senior Marshal Brother Wu want to do? Seeing that she was glaring at him fiercely, Senior Marshal Brother Wu first looked scared, then angry. Finally, he took out another talisman. High-level talismans weren't cheap, and they were also very powerful. Even ordinary talismans weren't easy to deal with if there were many of them. In the previous fights of magical power, Mo Tiange always tried her best to avoid directly facing the opponent's talismans. Usually, the outcome of the fight would be decided before the opponent's talismans were used. But now, because she didn't want to fight, Senior Marshal Brother Wu took the initiative. Senior Marshal Brother Wu, she asked coldly, what's your objective? I don't think I've offended you, have I? At that moment, a very slippery voice answered, "You haven't offended him, the one you've offended is me." Mo Tiange turned her head to look and was shocked. Not far from her, a person was walking down the path leading to the valley. It was Jiang Qingxian. Her expression changed, and her mind raced. The first thing she thought of was that she picked up the pill recipe for the constitution-enhancing pill that he accidentally missed. However, she was also puzzled as to how he discovered it. Soon after, she thought about it. Jiang Qingxian was hiding here, but she didn't sense him at all even when he approached her. He must have used a breath-concealing technique, which meant he must have long been prepared to deal with her. But if she killed Jiang Qingxian, would she still have a foothold in Mount Yunwu? That Mount Yunwu's master would most likely eat her alive and cook her alive. That's not right. If he was a core formation cultivator from Jiang clan, would he need to deal with her like this? She was only a small aura refining cultivator. To a core formation cultivator, she was nothing more than an ant that could be pinched to death. However, the current situation didn't allow her to think too much. She reached into her Qiankuan bag and several formation discs and flags flew out. Jiang Qingxian snorted contemptuously, then angrily said to Senior Marshal Brother Wu, "Really useless. You can't do anything at all. Go stand guard." In front of Jiang Qingxian, Senior Marshal Brother Wu immediately lowered his head and bowed. "Yes, Senior Marshal Brother Jiang." Mo Tiange couldn't help but snort. So this Senior Marshal Brother Wu was Jiang Qingxian's little follower. No wonder he was so spineless. Once Senior Marshal Brother Wu walked far away, Jiang Qingxian turned around to size up the 5 elements life and death formation she laid temporarily. A mocking expression appeared on his face. "Using formations to deal with me? Humph." Mo Tiange suddenly remembered that Jiang Qingxian had a heaven-breaking mirror in his hand. It was precisely a magic weapon that could restrain formations. At this time, Jiang Qingxian indeed took out that mirror. A blue light shot out from the mirror and shone on her formation disc. With a loud boom, the formation disc immediately exploded. This formation was modified to be suitable for temporary formations, but its power was still somewhat lacking. Mo Tiange's expression changed, but she soon calmed down and sneered. "So what if I don't use formations? What do I have to fear?" Jiang Qingxian naturally knew she was mocking him for not being skilled in Daoist techniques, so he immediately shouted angrily. Mo Tiange stared at him and asked in a heavy voice, "May I know how I offended Senior Marshal Brother Jiang? Why did Senior Marshal Brother Jiang set such a trap to deal with me?" Upon hearing her question, Jiang Qingxian burst into laughter. After laughing for a long time, he finally said mockingly, "Even if I didn't believe you were the one who followed me and took away the pill recipe for constitution-enhancing pill, judging from your reaction, I believe it. Do you still think I don't know?" Mo Tiange originally didn't believe in luck. She just thought she would confess without being pressed if Jiang Qingxian didn't do it because of this matter, so she asked again. Now that she knew it was because of this matter, she wasn't disappointed. She already knew she had a slim chance of survival, so she calmed down and stopped thinking about other things. She asked then, "How did Senior Marshal Brother Jiang know?" Chapter 86. Mo Tiange couldn't figure it out. She was obviously very careful in everything, so how did this hedonistic son know she was the one who took it? At that moment, Jiang Qingxian's gaze suddenly became very strange. His gaze was filled with malice, making Mo Tiange feel like she was a fish on the chopping block, waiting to be slaughtered. Jiang Qingxian looked at her with great interest and said, "Do you know how I found out the recipe for constitution-enhancing pill was in that boy's hands?" A slight frown appeared on Mo Tiange's face as she said, "Senior Marshal Brother Jiang, please speak." Jiang Qingxian, however, didn't care about her attitude. He just laughed arrogantly and proudly said, "There's no harm in telling you now. I'm so lucky. Great-grandfather sent me to the Tiandao sect to do some work so that I can make friends with some famous disciples." Unexpectedly, as soon as he arrived at the Huanshan dock, he saw that lad asking if there were any purple Ganoderma older than 500 years in the store. Naturally, the store didn't have any. At first, I didn't pay much attention to him, but I happened to bump into him in another shop. He was selling constitution-enhancing pills. That store owner is ignorant and doesn't know what it is, but I know what the constitution-enhancing pill is. Then, I asked junior brother Chin to pretend to have a conflict with him, to probe his background and figure out if there was an expert behind him. So that was how it was. Presumably, this individual cultivator hadn't heard about the commotion caused by the constitution-enhancing pill, so he'd used the constitution-enhancing pill to exchange for spirit stones to buy materials. As a result, he'd attracted a disaster and lost his life. That's right, purple Ganoderma. She could more or less guess how she was discovered. At the Tiandao sect's Hu clan, did you arrive at the auction early and saw me buying the purple Ganoderma? Jiang Qingxian burst into laughter. You don't know, do you? When I came to the Tiandao sect, I went to the Hu clan to handle some matters. I also became friends with the Hu clan, so I was already in the room next to the counter. I heard that someone was buying a purple Ganoderma, so I went to take a look out of curiosity. I didn't expect to see you again. The more I looked at you, the more familiar you seemed. Later, I finally remembered that you were also a disciple of Yunwu's sect. After listening up to this point, how could Mo Tiange still not understand? She had underestimated him. Now that she thought about it, the only time she saw Jiang Qingxian's behavior was when she first entered Yunwu's sect and saw him beating up Jiang Shanghang on the road. How could she be certain that Jiang Qingxian was an idiot just because of that? Besides, even if he beat up Jiang Shanghang, could it prove that he was incompetent? Since Jiang Qingxian grew up in a big clan and had a core formation cultivator as a direct descendant, even if he was originally a waste, he could still be taught to be a schemer. However, it was too late now. She knew what mistake she had made, but it was a mistake that could not be made up for. Jiang Qingxian continued, "Fortunately, at that time, I didn't dare to make a move in Hu clan's territory and went to the Huanshan dock. Sure enough, the innkeeper confirmed that you did not go back that night. Then, I found someone who seemed to know you." At this point, he deliberately paused, but Mo Tiange's whole body turned cold. "Tianqiao." She gritted her teeth and asked, "You? What did you do to Tianqiao? What happened?" At this moment, Jiang Qingxian finally couldn't hold back his complacency and burst into loud laughter. His eyes were clearly filled with evilness that would make anyone who saw him feel nauseous. "Junior Marshal Brother Yi, if you were dressed as a woman, you'd definitely be a delicate and pretty woman. Why do you have to dress like this?" Her secret was suddenly exposed, but Mo Tiange just stood there in a daze and didn't say anything for a long time. She felt very desperate. She didn't know whether it was because of Tianqiao or because of herself. Jiang Qingxian sized her up, seemingly already considering where to start. He said, "Junior Marshal Brother Yi, you mustn't misunderstand your good sister. She would rather die than say anything. That's why I killed her husband in front of her and searched her soul. Only then did I realize that you're really not simple." Soul searching. This word caused Mo Tiange's eyes to widen. She clenched her fists so tightly that her nails almost embedded into her palms. Soul searching could be said to be the cruelest spell in the cultivation world. It used a secret technique to extract a person's memory while they were still alive. The person whose soul was searched would suffer a fate worse than death. However, this spell could only be used on cultivators whose cultivation levels were one realm lower than the casters. Jiang Qingxian was only an aura refining cultivator, so he couldn't use the soul-searching technique on Meng Sigui. However, he could use it on Tianqiao. Even a cultivator would become an idiot if the soul-searching technique was used on them, let alone immortal. Tianqiao was already dead. She was dead because of her. Mo Tiange took a deep breath and felt extremely calm. She said slowly, "Other people might not know who Yi Shaotian is, but you're from Yunwu sect. Therefore, you immediately came back to lay a trap and waited for me to walk right into your trap." Jiang Qingxian smiled and said, "Correct. Junior Marshal Brother Yi, you're very smart. Unfortunately, sometimes you're too smart for your own good. Although in your eyes, I'm not a smart person, the things your sister knows are already enough." After some thought, I can roughly guess why you disguise yourself as a man. Purine constitution. Ha! Heaven is really helping me. How could I let you off? Mo Tiange, on the other hand, was very calm. She said faintly, "In that case, Senior Marshal Brother Jiang didn't tell anyone about this?" Jiang Qingxian said, "Of course. How could I let other people have a share of the loot? Even your grandfather didn't tell you?" This question made Jiang Qingxian pause for a moment. He indeed didn't tell his grandfather because he was afraid his great-grandfather wouldn't give him this benefit. In any case, in the split second he was distracted, Mo Tiange moved her wrist. In a flash, several flying needles were shot straight at his vital points. His reaction was a bit slow, so he was immediately pierced by several needles, causing him to fall to the ground. With spirit tools and talismans clasped in her hands, Mo Tiange said coldly, "I know since you dared to fight me alone, you must have some kind of unique skill, but I'm not a pushover." Anger appeared in Jiang Qingxian's eyes. When she shot out the talismans, he touched his Qianquan bag and a small and exquisite light shield appeared in front of him, blocking all the attacks. Mo Tiange immediately controlled her greenwood sword to rush forward. Sure enough, Jiang Qingxian was flustered. After being attacked by many talismans, the light shield on his body was already shaking and on the verge of breaking. Now that Mo Tiange was closing in on him, he could only retreat and take out several things from his Qianquan bag. Seeing the large number of talismans in his hands, Mo Tiange frowned and quickly retreated. In fights of magical power, aura refining cultivators relied too much on talismans, so she didn't have any advantage against the descendants of clans. If Jiang Qingxian didn't have these talismans, dealing with him would have been very easy. However, he used a high-grade defensive talisman to block all her attacks. Mo Tiange took out another talisman and decided to risk it all. Although the talismans she had weren't as high-grade as Jiang Qingxian's, it wasn't like she didn't have a chance to win. However, Jiang Qingxian once again searched his Qianquan bag and threw something out. Mo Tiange quickly dodged it and threw an earth-splitting talisman. Jiang Qingxian once again slapped a defensive talisman on his body. The corners of his mouth curved into a sinister smile as he stared behind her. In an instant, a surge of spiritual aura rushed towards her from behind. Mo Tiange dodged, but when she turned around to see what was behind her, her expression couldn't help but change. It was a rope-like magic weapon overflowing with spiritual aura. As if it had eyes, it rushed straight towards her. Under the pursuit of this magic weapon, Mo Tiange didn't even have the strength to throw more talismans, she could only run away. Aura refining cultivators used spirit tools, foundation building cultivators used magic tools, and core formation cultivators and above used magic weapons. Magic weapons were originally refined by core formation cultivators and above, so how could their power be compared to spirit tools? Even if aura refining cultivators could only display a little bit of their power, they still weren't something cultivators in the same realm as them could deal with. At this moment, Mo Tiange was filled with regret. It wasn't that she didn't have any magic weapons on her, she had that enchanting lantern. However, she never had the time to refine it, so she couldn't use it. Another talisman rushed towards her. She dodged with great difficulty, but her footsteps stagnated. In an instant, the thing behind her sprang forward and firmly bound her. The spiritual aura in her body stagnated and she fell to the ground. Seeing that she was firmly bound, Jiang Qingxian stopped and burst out laughing. I begged my great-grandfather for this dragon-trapping rope. What do you think? Can you still move? Dragon-trapping rope, correct, dragon-trapping rope. Even a core formation cultivator would be bound if they weren't careful. Jiang Qingxian walked forward complacently. Sensing that all the spiritual aura in her body was imprisoned by the dragon-trapping rope and that she didn't even have any room to resist, Mo Tiange suddenly felt powerless. She had been cautious for 10 years, but because of a moment of carelessness, she actually revealed something and trapped herself in a dangerous situation. Jiang Qingxian cautiously pulled out several flying needles from his body. When his injuries were slightly better, he walked towards her and pulled the Qianquan bag from her waist. He opened it to take a look and was astonished. There's actually so many things. The way he looked at Mo Tiange changed. What a pity, what a pity. You're also a character, but you were born with the wrong gender. If you want to blame someone, blame the heavens. Under Mo Tiange's glare, Jiang Qingxian stuffed her Qianquan bag into his robe and leaned closer to look at her face. After staring for a while, he pulled down her hair bun and lifted her face. TSK, you don't look bad. Although you can't be considered an outstanding beauty, you can still be considered a beauty. Mo Tiange turned her head away in disgust. If she had the chance, she would definitely chop off those disgusting hands of hers. Jiang Qingxian didn't get angry. Instead, he said with a smile, Junior Martial Brother Yi, don't blame me for being too insensitive. In this place, we have to do good deeds. I don't want any problems to occur. Mo Tiange tilted her head, revealing a sneer on her face. She naturally knew what Jiang Qingxian wanted to do, but she wasn't stupid enough to think begging for mercy would work. If she could keep her life today, she would definitely make this person pay tenfold in the future. Seeing her like this made Jiang Qingxian even happier. Junior Martial Brother Yi, your appearance is much better than those wooden beauties. Why didn't I think of this? Hot beauties also have a different taste. Mo Tiange didn't feel like paying attention to him and just acted as if she couldn't feel anything. However, when those disgusting hands touched her, she still opened her eyes angrily. Get lost. Jiang Qingxian laughed cheerfully. It's time to unravel the mystery. Junior Martial Brother Yi, what are you wearing? It's so hard, I can't even feel it. Oh. You're wearing really thick clothes, but it doesn't matter. I'm very happy to undress a beauty. Mo Tiange firmly bit her lip until it bled. She endured the hands groping her body and told herself that she must endure it. Although she wished she could die, she would never commit suicide because of this. She wanted to live until the day she could chop this person into pieces. Nevertheless, this kind of humiliation made the rims of her eyes moisten. Chapter 87. Ah! With a blood-curdling scream, the hands on her body disappeared. Mo Tiange opened her eyes in a daze. She saw that Jiang Qingxian, who was doing whatever he wanted a moment ago, was now lying on the ground. There was a big hole in his chest from which blood was gushing out, and he was no longer breathing. She looked up and saw Jiang Shanghang's gloomy face. Senior Martial Brother Jiang. She was almost speechless and felt exhausted. When those hands were groping her body, she wasn't afraid because the nauseating feeling washed away her fear. Now, she finally felt a lingering fear. After her mood calmed down a little, she remembered that even if Jiang Qingxian was dead, if Jiang Shanghang also had some ideas, her situation wouldn't be any different. She looked down nervously. Fortunately, her undergarments hadn't been taken off, so not even an inch of her skin was exposed. However, she didn't know whether Jiang Shanghang heard what Jiang Qingxian said or not. When she looked up, she saw that Jiang Shanghang was also in a daze. His soul seemed to have left his body, and his face was covered in sweat. Only now did Imotianga realize that the person he just killed was his own cousin. Although the two of them used to be more like enemies than brothers, they were still different from other people. His mind must be in a mess right now, right? With this thought in mind, she tentatively called out, "Senior Marshal Brother Jiang." Jiang Shanghang suddenly woke up. He wiped the sweat on his forehead and looked at her. Soon after, he walked over and pulled off the dragon trapping rope on her body. Jiang Qingxian was already dead, so the dragon trapping rope was easily pulled off. He said, "Get up." Imotianga heaved a sigh of relief upon hearing what he said. Jiang Shanghang's behavior was normal. Apparently, he arrived later and didn't hear what Jiang Qingxian said. She stood up, turned around, and tied up her clothes. She then turned around and cupped her hands. "Thank you, Senior Marshal Brother Jiang, for saving my life." The way she addressed him now carried a hint of gratitude. No matter what Jiang Shanghang was like in the past, it was a fact that he saved her today. Jiang Shanghang's expression had already returned to his former self. He answered indifferently, "No need to thank me. You saved me once, so I'm just paying you back." Imotianga was stunned. Did he say, "What happened 3 years ago"? That should be it. The two of them only crossed paths once. 3 years ago, when Senior Marshal Brother Jiang was beaten up by Jiang Qingxian, she happened to see it, so she secretly brought him back. Later on, she even resented him for not knowing what was good for him. But as it turned out, Senior Marshal Brother Jiang wasn't that indifferent and heartless. Although he acted like he didn't care, he still remembered 3 years later. Imotianga couldn't help but think that in the cultivation world, people didn't necessarily have to be selfish to the end. When considering things for themselves, helping others out a bit more might be the same as planting good karma for themselves. In the cycle of karma, there were not only evil consequences, but also good ones. With this thought in mind, she no longer felt uncomfortable as she looked at Jiang Shanghang, who was still covered in a gloomy and cold aura. Honestly speaking, Jiang Shanghang simply didn't like being with them. His words weren't pleasant to hear, and his attitude was cold, but there wasn't anything bad about him. But, how did he know that he was in danger, and how did he come so timely? Imotianga stared at the corpse on the ground. Jiang Shanghang had already lowered his body to search Jiang Qingxian's corpse. She couldn't help but ask, "Senior Brother Jiang, how did you know I was in danger?" Jiang Shanghang didn't raise his head and only said, "I know that person." "Ha! The person who told you to come. That's Senior Brother Wu." Imotianga finally understood. Jiang Shanghang had always been cultivating inside the house, so when that Senior Brother Wu came to look for her, he knew that person was Jiang Qingxian's attendant. What Marshal Uncle Zhou wanted to see her and so on were all lies. When she realized this, Imotianga finally realized how lucky she was. If it wasn't because Jiang Shanghang happened to be inside the house and overheard their conversation, she really would've. Then what about that person now? Jiang Qingxian told him to watch over her. "Killed him," Jiang Shanghang said faintly. Imotianga was once again stunned. This Senior Brother Jiang was also very cruel and merciless. When he needed to kill someone, he didn't show any mercy. But now, she had a different impression of Jiang Shanghang. She actually thought this was a good thing. In the cultivation world, when it was time to be cruel, one couldn't show any mercy. Otherwise, one wouldn't be able to survive. At this moment, Jiang Shanghang had already found 2 Qinquan bags. He threw the one she had taken back to her and asked, "Is this yours?" Mo Tiange took it. "Yes, thank you." After he finished searching, Jiang Shanghang stood up and said with a frown, "Junior. Martial brother Yi, you disguised yourself as a man and entered Yunwu's sect. What's your purpose?" His tone was still cold and gloomy, but Mo Tiange didn't feel uncomfortable listening to it. Maybe it was because her opinion of him had changed, or maybe it was because he wasn't questioning her. Mo Tiange smiled bitterly and answered, "If I said I didn't have a purpose, would senior brother Jiang believe me?" Jiang Shanghang said, "It doesn't matter whether I believe you or not. In any case, I'm not interested in your business. It's just that both of us can't escape responsibility for today's matter." Speaking of this, Mo Tiange naturally knew. When she was fighting against Jiang Qingxian, she already thought about this problem. If she killed Jiang Qingxian, she couldn't stay on Mount Yunwu any longer. She had to escape quickly to avoid being caught by Jiang clan's people. Moreover, Jiang clan had 2 core formation cultivators, so it was really. She heaved a sigh and said, "This matter. I implicated senior martial brother. I'm truly sorry." Upon hearing what she said, Jiang Shanghang finally revealed a trace of disappointment on his face. However, he still said resolutely, "Since I'm willing to make a move, I naturally don't care. I've long wanted to leave this Jiang clan." "You want to leave Jiang clan?" Mo Tiange was surprised. Even if Jiang Shanghang wasn't valued by Jiang clan, in the end, he was still under a big tree. He still hadn't built his foundation, so if he left Jiang clan, it would be inconvenient for him in the future. Jiang Shanghang sneered. "The last time I went home, I found out that my grandmother, the only one left alive, had already passed away. My grandmother was only a mortal and had a minor illness. They only needed to casually make a move to solve it, but they didn't care. What reason do I have to stay?" Perhaps the 2 of them were in the same boat now, so he blurted out these words. However, right after he finished speaking, he seemed to be somewhat regretful and immediately said, "Enough with the nonsense. Now that things have come to this, we better leave quickly. If we delay and someone finds out, we'll lose our lives." Mo Tiange nodded. "Senior martial brother Jiang, I won't be polite with you anymore. I definitely won't be able to wash my hands clean of this matter. That surnamed Wu came to look for me, so someone will definitely know. At that time, their deaths will definitely be traced back to me. However, it'll be easy for you to escape." Jiang Shanghang said, "I don't dare to rely on luck. I'll take this opportunity to leave. If they all go after you, it'll be easy for me to escape." Mo Tiange also understood this principle. If the 2 of them committed a crime and Jiang Shanghang was in the dark, it would be easier for him to conceal it. Mo Tiange didn't feel unhappy. After all, the cause was herself, so she immediately nodded. "I know." After the 2 of them reached an agreement, Jiang Shanghang lowered his head to size up Jiang Qingxian's corpse. Soon after, he used the quicksand technique to dispose of Jiang Qingxian's corpse. Once Jiang Qingxian's corpse sank into the ground and disappeared, Jiang Shanghang once again searched for something inside Jiang Qingxian's Qinquan bag. In the end, he took out a bottle of medicinal pills. When he poured them out and saw that there were actually 4 or 5 pills inside, his expression immediately darkened. Mo Tiange was confused. "Senior martial brother Jiang, what's wrong?" Jiang Shanghang tossed the medicinal pills back, but he hesitated for a moment. In the end, he poured out 2 pills and handed them to her. "These are Jiang clan's foundation refining pills. Take one when you build your foundation. It can increase your chances of building your foundation. Mo Tiange raised her eyebrows in astonishment as she stared at the medicinal pill in her hand. She had long heard that Jiang clan had medicinal pills that could assist in building the foundation, but Jiang Shanghang didn't get any. No wonder he had that kind of expression a moment ago. He'd already obtained foundation building pills and was about to build his foundation, but he hadn't even seen a single one. Now, however, he actually found 5 pills on Jiang Qingxin's body. How biased was Jiang clan? At this moment, she already felt that it was a good thing that Jiang Shanghang left the Jiang clan. They usually bullied him, ignored him and his family, and were even biased to such an important matter like building his foundation. Even if he stayed in Jiang clan, he wouldn't get any benefits. Mo Tiange hesitated as she stared at the foundation refining pills in her hand. Senior Marshal Brother Jiang, you still want to give me such a precious thing? Jiang Shanghang said, every time you take a foundation refining pill, its effect will decrease a bit. After 3 pills, its effect won't be that great anymore. I'll take these 2 pills as a reward for helping me divert the danger away. What he said was reasonable, so Mo Tiange nodded and put the 2 medicinal pills away. Soon after, she thought of something and said, Senior Marshal Brother Jiang, can you look around? Is there a type of medicinal pill you don't recognize? Jiang Shanghang looked at her suspiciously. Mo Tiange simply said, he has constitution-enhancing pills on him. Jiang Shanghang's eyes widened in shock. He obviously knew what constitution-enhancing pills were. He asked her, how did you know? Mo Tiange smiled bitterly. I offended him because of this. She didn't explain in detail. Even if Jiang Shanghang saved her life, it was better not to mention that she had the pill recipe for constitution-enhancing pills. Jiang Shanghang also didn't ask anymore. After searching for a while, he indeed found a jade bottle inside Jiang Qingxin's Qinkuan bag. He opened the bottle and saw 2 white medicinal pills with a strong medicinal fragrance. Seems like it's these, Mo Tiange said happily. These 2 medicinal pills were exactly the same as the ones recorded in the jade slip. When she saw the pill Jiang Shanghang handed her, she waved her hand. Senior Marshal Brother Jiang, you don't need to give it to me. Just take it as me repaying Senior Marshal Brother Jiang's kindness. Since she already had the pill recipe for constitution-enhancing pills, why should she fight with Jiang Shanghang over these 2 pills? In any case, he saved her life and gave her 2 foundation refining pills. She wasn't someone who couldn't tell good from bad. Jiang Shanghang didn't suspect anything and directly put the medicinal pills away. Constitution-enhancing pills were indeed rare, but they could only show their value after taking a lot of other medicinal pills for a long time. These 2 pills really couldn't be considered much, they weren't even as valuable as foundation refining pills. After they finished dividing the spoils, Jiang Shanghang said, all right, we can't delay any longer. Junior Marshal Brother Yi, let's run for our lives. Mo Tiange naturally knew that time was precious, so she didn't say anything unnecessary. She just cupped her hands and said, take care, Senior Marshal Brother Jiang. We'll meet again if fate allows it. She then turned around and walked away. A voice came from behind her. Junior Marshal Brother Yi. Mo Tiange turned around. Jiang Shanghang, however, raised the corners of his mouth and pointed at his own head. Only then did Mo Tiange realize that her hair was still loose. She hastily picked up the hairpin on the ground and tied it into a Daoist bun. After saying their goodbyes once again, Mo Tiange walked down the mountain. She couldn't help but feel absurd. After getting along with him for 3 years, she only treated Jiang Shanghang as a stranger. She never expected that when she ran into a disaster, it would be him who came to her rescue. Unfortunately, the 2 of them had just gotten a little closer, but now they had to run for their lives separately. Mo Tiange didn't know whether they would have the chance to meet again in the future. The matters of this world really made people sigh with emotion. Chapter 88. After saying goodbye to Jiang Shangheng, Mo Tiange didn't immediately go down the mountain. Instead, she turned into a kernel. After checking that there was no one around, she laid a simple concealment formation and quickly changed her clothes. Although she was only an aura refining disciple in the sect, if she went down the mountain without any disguise, Jiang clan would easily find her whereabouts. Fortunately, Jiang Qingxian didn't tell anyone about her. As long as she changed her clothes, presumably, no one would suspect her afterward. She changed into women's clothes and tied her hair into a simple bun. After confirming there were no problems, she swaggered away. Yunmu's sect had many disciples, and there were disciples coming and going every day. Sure enough, she wasn't noticed on the way down the mountain and smoothly reached the market square at the foot of the mountain. After making many turns, she returned to the small courtyard and pushed the door open. Second uncle. Yi Jiang, who was still meditating in the corner, was startled by her. You. Xiaotian. Why did you change back into women's clothes? Mo Tiange said anxiously, Second uncle, let's go. I've caused trouble. What? I killed the direct descendant of the sect's core formation grandmaster. These words shocked Yi Jiang. What's going on? Mo Tiange said anxiously, I'll tell you on the way. Second uncle, let's go first. Yi Jiang thought for a moment. This child never exaggerated things, so he immediately propped himself up. Okay. Quickly take the things you need to take with you. We'll go now. The uncle and nephew pair moved very fast. In less than a quarter of an hour, they had packed all the things they needed to take with them. After walking out of the market square on Mount Yunwu, Yi Jiang took out a horsetail whisk magic tool and the two of them rode it to leave Mount Yunwu. Second uncle, can you hold on? Mo Tiange couldn't help but feel guilty when she saw her pale second uncle, who hadn't traveled for a long time, controlling the magic tool. Second uncle didn't have much time left, but he was forced to flee because of her. If there was an accident on the way, Yi Jiang shook his head with a calm expression. It's nothing. It won't consume much spiritual aura to travel. Tell me what happened first. Mo Tiange told him everything that happened today. When she finished, she asked, Second uncle, can we escape? As he listened to her story, Yi Jiang's expression was solemn. At this time, he didn't speak for a long time. In the end, he only sighed and said, Do you know what you did wrong now? Mo Tiange lowered her head. I was too arrogant. I didn't take other people seriously. Yi Jiang said, It's good that you understand. A fall into the pit, a gain in your wit. Don't do it again in the future. A few days ago, you said that you met an old friend. Why didn't you tell me that you revealed your secret? Ashamed, Mo Tiange said, I forgot. This answer caused Yi Jiang to frown slightly. Did you think that the other party was only a small cultivator and immortal, and that they couldn't do anything to you, so you didn't take them seriously? Mo Tiange hesitated for a moment before she nodded. And, Tianqiao. I believe she won't say anything. Besides, they don't know where I am, so where can they find Yi Xiaotian? Nonsense. Yi Jiang reprimanded her sternly. You have to remember that a secret can only be called a secret if it's not spoken. There's a saying among mortals, walls have ears, and there's another saying, a freak combination of factors, there's nothing certain in this world. What you thought was indeed correct. Under normal circumstances, even if the two of them had bad intentions, they still couldn't do anything to you. However, you also didn't expect that this secret would be discovered by someone who knew who Yi Xiaotian was, did you? Mo Tiange silently received his scolding. She then listened to second uncle saying, in the past few years, second uncle hasn't been by your side all the time. I didn't expect that I'd actually let you develop such an arrogant temper. You're a bit smart, but how many cultivators aren't smart? Do you think you're amazing just because you fought a few battles and can defeat most cultivators in the same realm as you? If you have this kind of idea, you might as well go back and seek death. After he finished speaking, Yi Jiang suddenly felt dizzy. His lifespan was almost up, and he was seriously injured. Although he was still a foundation-building cultivator, his body was a lot weaker. Mo Tiange noticed this and hastily supported him. Second uncle. After swallowing a medicinal pill, Yi Jiang waved his hand and said, also, you have to know that telling a secret to someone else means you want them to bear the risk together with you. If it wasn't for the fact that your older sister knew about you, she probably wouldn't have died. If you tell others about some things, you'll only harm yourself and others. Mo Tiange bit her lip and didn't refute him. Tianxiao was indeed killed by her. Perhaps it was because Tianxiao remembered her warning that Jiang Qingxian saw through her, causing her to suffer a soul search. Both husband and wife lost their lives. She made a mistake, but the other two had to bear the consequences. Upon seeing her expression, Yi Jiang finally stopped scolding her. He said calmly, all right, since it's already happened, it's useless to be sad. Right now, we should think about how to escape. I reckon we only have 1 or 2 days. After that, the other party will probably catch up to us. Mo Tiange was silent for a long time before she finally asked, second uncle, can we really escape? Yi Jiang glanced at her then said solemnly, you've made another mistake by saying this. You have to remember that no matter what kind of situation you're in, you can't give up. Sometimes, you just need to persevere a little longer and you'll be able to escape alive. Mo Tiange nodded. I understand, second uncle. Seeing that she was obedient, Yi Jiang sighed faintly and said slowly, Xiao Tian, this might be the last time. Second uncle won't be able to protect you anymore. You have to grow up to be able to protect yourself, understand? His tone was very helpless, making Mo Tiange feel a lump in her throat. Second uncle, Yi Jiang just patted her head like he did when she was a child. In the end, the two of them stopped in a small town at the foot of a mountain in the north. They concealed their breaths, pretending to be a grandfather and granddaughter whose cultivation levels were only in the 3rd or 4th layer of the aura refining realm, and entered the town's inn. If the other party's core formation cultivators personally attack us, we won't be able to escape no matter what. It'd be better to hide in the crowd, Yi Jiang said. Mo Tiange didn't have any objections. The older the ginger, the spicier it was. Second uncle's way of handling things was more appropriate than hers. Besides, second uncle's current body really wasn't suitable for long journeys. After staying in this small town for 2 days, Mo Tiange indeed noticed that there were a lot of foundation-building cultivators flying in the sky. This place was very close to Mount Yunwu, so those were probably Yunwu Mountain's foundation-building disciples who came because of her. She felt apprehensive. If they found her, second uncle's strength would be damaged, and she hadn't built her foundation yet, so she practically wouldn't have any room to resist. Xiaotian. Ha! Mo Tiange turned around and looked at second uncle, who was meditating on the bed. Yi Jiang looked at her leaning against the window and said faintly, it's useless to look. Sit down and cultivate. But she really couldn't calm down. Yi Jiang stared deeply at her then sighed. His sigh made Mo Tiange feel ashamed. It seemed she was too disappointing and let second uncle down. Yi Jiang stared at her for a long time before he finally said, come here. Second uncle wants to talk to you about something. Mo Tiange obediently walked over, sat on the stool in front of the bed and said softly, "Second uncle, tell me. Xiao Tian, do you remember what happened 10 years ago?" Mo Tiange nodded lightly. 10 years ago was the year she came to Kunwu. Yi Jingwen, a foundation-building disciple of Xianqing school, took her to Kunwu from the secular world and handed her over to second uncle. From then on, she officially embarked on the path of cultivation. Then, do you remember Xianqing school? Mo Tiange nodded again, but she was puzzled. Second uncle, why did you mention Xianqing school? Didn't we come to East Kunwu to avoid them? Yi Jiang shook his head and sighed. Times have changed. I've been thinking about it these past 2 days. You should go to Xianqing school. Mo Tiange was shocked. Second uncle. Yi Jiang chuckled softly. His expression was calm as if he'd already made up his mind. Xianqing school is the second biggest cultivation group in the Celestial Pole. It's very powerful in West Kunwu. If you go to Xianqing school, you can at least cultivate in peace. Second uncle. Mo Tiange said anxiously, didn't you say they harbored evil intentions towards me? Now that we've been on the run for 10 years, why? Yi Jiang smiled bitterly and said, yes, I eavesdropped on the conversation between Yi Jingwen and Jing Xian. Master Daoist Shoujing wanted you to join Xianqing school because he seemed to think highly of your constitution. I didn't dare to take risks, so I took you away from Mount Dongmeng that day. But I've been thinking about it these past few days. Your father said Master Daoist Shoujing made a heart demon oath to him, so he handed you over to him. Now that your life is in danger and second uncle is about to pass away, no one is more suitable to be your backer than him. Mo Tiange paused for a while then said in a low voice, second uncle, didn't you say? Although he made a heart demon oath, if he only ordered me to perform dual cultivation with someone, it wouldn't be considered a violation of the oath. That's true, but if you don't agree, even if you die, he probably won't harm your life. I originally didn't have the heart to let you suffer in Xianqing school, so I thought I still had 100 years to live. But now that I've provoked this disaster and second uncle's lifespan is almost up. Second uncle. Yi Jiang stared at her and continued to speak. Second uncle won't feel at ease letting you face a group of people who want to kill you by yourself, so let's take a gamble. Upon seeing second uncle's resolute expression, Mo Tiange knew he had made up his mind this time. However, she herself couldn't make up her mind. Go to Xianqing school. She accidentally divulged her secret twice, and both times brought disaster upon her. How could she feel at ease living under the nose of someone who knew her secret? No, second uncle. In the future, I'll go to West Kunwu. Yunwu sect isn't a big cultivation group, so as long as I go to West Kunwu, nothing will happen, but what if your secret is divulged again? Can you escape every single time? There won't be a future, she practically shouted. Yi Jiang just shook his head resolutely. You can't guarantee that. Second uncle, Yi Jiang showed a faint smile and looked at her tenderly. Tiange, this is the first time you've worn women's clothes since you started following second uncle. These past few days, second uncle has been thinking about how adorable you were when I first saw you 10 years ago. I don't, yes, you don't really want to be a woman, but second uncle hopes you can have this opportunity to become a real woman, not Yi Xiaotian, but Mo Tiange. He smiled again. Besides, did you know? Second uncle has been paying special attention. In the past few years, no one from Xianqing school came to catch us, which means, perhaps Master Daoist Shoujing is trustworthy. Facing second uncle's aged face, Mo Tiange was silent. She knew second uncle wouldn't harm her, but she also knew second uncle had no other choice. Because if second uncle wasn't here, she definitely wouldn't be able to escape by herself. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.